Matters of privilege and recognition of guests, the Honourable Premier.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Welcome back after, I hope, a somewhat relaxing couple of days for my colleagues here in the legislature. I want to begin also, Mr. Speaker, by I wasn't able to get to the ice walk yesterday in Lennox Island because events had popped up. I had asked the Minister of Fisheries and Communities to represent me, which he did. I know the Leader of the Opposition and many others were there, Mr. Speaker. I want to congratulate the organisers, Chief Bernard, Jamie Thomas, Tara McLean, and so many others for pulling this off. It hasn't been an easy event to plan. It was rescheduled a couple of different times, but it was looked like a great turnout there yesterday. Not just about the journey of the Lennox Island people, Mr. Speaker, pre the 73 Causeway, but I think also symbolic of the journey of our First Nations in this province, in this country, Mr. Speaker. I think that when we look back at this history, there aren't many proud days for this country and how we've dealt with our First Nations, and it's important we learn from that we never forget that, and to use that as the base of what we're supposed to do heading forward. So, Mr. Speaker, the spirit of collaboration and cooperation to date is better. It needs to continue to improve, and it's events like these and conversations, difficult as they may be, that we need to have to make sure they do improve. So congratulations to all those who organized and participated in that. Mr. Speaker, hockey PEI held championships all across this lovely province this weekend, and winners were from all different associations across PEI, which was nice to see. I did want to point out too, the under-18 girls A-League, Mr. Speaker, which my daughter Camden played in this year. There's a team from Summerside, Mr. Speaker, who finished last in the regular season. They pulled things together in the provincials, Mr. Speaker, and went on a run, undefeated, and won the Island Championship, Mr. Speaker. So a great proud moment for those individuals, and it just shows, Mr. Speaker, sometimes you're down, but you should never be counted out. Also, Mr. Speaker, my good friend Scott Ellsworth with the North River under-13 AA boys last night in Alberton against a very tough Pownal team, losing 4-1 after the second period, clawed back to 4-3, and with 39 seconds left, scored 3 more goals to win 6-4. So a great comeback and an exciting moment that they'll always remember for those boys. So congratulations to them and to all winners. I was really impressed to hear Keisha Ryan this morning, Mr. Speaker, from Charlottetown, who's a law student at Dalhousie University and was recently awarded a $30,000 scholarship from Scotiabank for a student studying law who was going to go on to support and advocate for anti-racism in law, Mr. Speaker. I had the opportunity to meet Keisha when she was on the UPEI Student Union, a very impressive young woman in this province, Mr. Speaker, and very articulate and really heartwarming to hear her perspective on life and how looking forward she is in her life to make a positive contribution for her community and the people who live in it. So well done, Keisha, and well deserved. And finally, Mr. Speaker, the PEI School Association Girls Basketball Championships were held yesterday, and the Charlottetown Rural Raiders won their 3rd straight AA title, defeating Three Oaks Senior High, led by playoff MVP Amy Plaganoff, Mr. Speaker. Just an impressive end to a distinguished career for Amy, and I see the member from Tignish, Palmer Road, posting a sign in my periphery talking about the Junior C playoffs. I put the whammy on the Georgetown team, Mr. Speaker. They're down 2-0 now, but down but not out. A long road back, and that road continues tonight with a game in Pownal. So best of luck to all those, Mr. Speaker, and don't ever count them out. Put it that way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you. Hard to follow, as often is when the Premier gets up and talks, particularly when we're talking about sports. And I actually coached a soccer team, Premier, that finished at the bottom of the league at the end of the season, but we did not turn it around. We were knocked out in the first round, so we were consistently rubbish. Yesterday, and the Premier, on a more serious note, the Premier mentioned that there have not been many proud days in this country's history when it comes to Indigenous relations, and indeed that's true. But yesterday felt like a proud day. It felt like a proud day to be in the company of our First Nations and to participate in the ice walk, along with the Minister of Fisheries and Communities and the member from O'Leary-Inverness and the member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park, and many other islanders. And it was a real privilege. It felt like a distinct privilege to be a part of that yesterday. And so I too want to thank the organisers who put that together. And I specifically want to thank Senator Brian Francis and Tara McLean for turning what was originally just a private conversation into what yesterday was a really important, profound cultural occasion. And Tara performed as part of the whole day was very beautiful. And when we got back to the community centre in Lennox Island, Tara performed the song that she co-wrote with a number of other people, including people from the Indigenous community. And this song is called Beneath the Path of Crows. And the opening lines of the song are this: I was born on stolen land, but we still don't understand. The whole thing was just a powerfully presented piece of work, and beautifully performed, of course. And it's a gorgeously haunting, powerful song, and I would encourage everybody to go looking for that. It's on YouTube. If you Google the Ice Walk, you'll find that. And of course, when it comes to Aboriginal issues, we have so much work to do, and there are so many wrongs to right, and we have so much learning to do to understand how we got to where we are today in our relation with the Indigenous peoples. And I looked at yesterday's walk as a real opportunity for education, for that promotion of understanding, and ultimately to foster the healing and reconciliation that we all want. And as the Premier said, it was a very symbolic event. And for me, that for those generations when the Mi'kmaq people were essentially isolated and moved off to Lennox Island, the only way they could keep contact with the island, whether that was for social reasons or impending medical issues or whatever, was to walk across the ice. And many, many of them lost their lives doing that, walking across thin ice to get to the mainland. And there was a list of names, an honour roll, essentially as part of the ceremony yesterday, which was for me, the most powerful moment of the whole day. And we've built a causeway. We now have something very safe and solid to connect the mainland to Lennox Island. And as the Premier said, I think the symbolism there that we've managed to create a solid foundation where once there was thin ice. But when it comes to the emotional and the legal connections between our community and that of First Nations here on Prince Edward Island, in many respects we're still on very thin ice. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of misunderstanding, a lack of understanding about what our relationship is with our First Nations. And we have to keep up the work to build, I guess, a causeway to reconciliation, which is so desperately required here. The Music PEI held their awards this past weekend, of course, and there were, I think, 30-something awards given out, a lot to very familiar names to people in this house. But there were a couple of long-standing Lifetime Achievement Awards, I think they're called. One went to Scott Parsons, who's a wonderful island musician, and the other went to Frances McBurney, who, Fran has been a huge contributor to the music community here on Prince Edward Island for all of her life, which is a very long and full life. She grew up in Nova Scotia, and Fran moved here after she got her music degree from Mount Allison, and her plan was just to stay here for a year. But like so many of us who come here, perhaps for a finite period, she's spent her whole life here, taught at UPEI, and she spent a career fostering island musicians, traveling with musicians, particularly in the classical vein. But I mean, Fran is an incredibly versatile and brilliant musician, and she can play anything you put down in front of her. But she's had countless piano students, and she's accompanied countless students to national music festivals here across Canada, one of them being my daughter many, many, many years ago. I think they went to Saskatchewan, and it was a beautiful relationship that Kate and Fran had and continue to have, actually. And she's so well respected and just a wonderful part of our island community. So it was great to see her being suitably acknowledged at the Music Awards this weekend. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too would like to make mention of the Indigenous Ice Walk yesterday and what a symbolic event it was. And when you think back to the 70s, the mid-70s, that's not that long ago. And I remember that and when the causeway was built, and it was quite a significant event. Also, I'd like to say something I didn't think I'd say in the legislature, counting teams out. My good friend Cedric Gallant, Toronto Maple Leafs, come from behind on Saturday night and won the game, and they won it in overtime, and I made sure I called him and congratulated him because he'd do the same. So kudos to you, Cedric, and your team. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to congratulate Catherine McClellan and Dylan Menzie, who were the big winners coming out of this weekend's awards, each claiming 3 awards. Mr. Speaker, there were many other successful artists who won a variety of awards over the weekend, and I would like to wish them congratulations for their accomplishments and wish them all the best going forward. Mr. Speaker, I want to draw attention to a recent fundraising event that happened at the Evangeline ATV Club, which was called It's Gonna Be All Right, Tracy. Tracy is a valid member of the club and put in countless voluntary hours. She has been instrumental in creating the snowmobile trail and always goes above and beyond for her community, teaching the youth step dancing and other musical activities. She recently was diagnosed with health issues, and the club sprung together into action. There was an online auction, 50-50 tickets, and food sales, and all of this resulted in $13,050 raised to help Tracy. This was a great display of community spirit and looking after one another, and I was very pleased to see these results. I want to thank all the club board members, all Tracy's friends, and everyone that came out, because this couldn't happen without the community, and I wish Tracy all the best going forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Communities.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Welcome to everybody from District 19 and all Islanders watching today. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize the Food Island Partnership Group and their new website that help market PEI mussels and oysters. Mr. Speaker, last week the Food Island Partnership launched a new website specifically for our mussel and oyster industry called the Social Shell. This website gives consumers simple tips for shopping, storing, preparing, and cooking our great island seafood. Mr. Speaker, the website also showcases members of industry such as farmers and growers, and also gives information on how we can buy PEI mussels and oysters. I'd like to thank everyone that was involved in this project and getting this initiative off the ground, and hope everyone gets a chance to visit the website for easy at-home recipes and take in some fun facts about our important industry here in PEI. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown Winslow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to welcome everyone from District 10, Charlottetown Winslow. To echo the Premier's comments, I just want to congratulate Hockey PEI on making sure that we, of course, were able to have provincial championships this weekend. I love the story of the team that went from last to first. My team, the Central Storm Team Orange U11 girls, also didn't finish. We finished at the bottom of the standings. We did make it to the finals. Unfortunately, lost out to the Mid-Isle Wildcats U11 team in the finals 2-0 on Sunday. I do want to thank, of course, my coaching staff, a great constituent from District 10, Charlottetown Winslow, Julie Hall, as well as Darren McDougall, Blaine Fitzpatrick, my manager, Chelsea McDougall, and my COVID liaison, my beautiful wife, Ashley Bell. Sophia, maybe next year we can do it. She is a Leafs fan, so she is used to hearing next year. Also, when I was growing up, Mr. Speaker, there was a lot of talk about all the great hockey players from Murray Harbour, Murray River, Brad Richards, Thatcher Bell, Brandon Gormley. I do think, Mr. Speaker, 10 to 15 years from now, I think there will be a lot of people saying of all the great hockey players from District 10. The U7s wrapped up their hockey season on Sunday, and I do want to congratulate all the teams, my son's team, the Sharks, the Maple Leafs, Golden Knights, Senators, Red Wings, and Penguins. Thanks to all the volunteers and all the coaches. And one other special mention, I believe the Sherwood U7s wrapped up last weekend or the previous weekend, and they were led by great tutelage of another great constituent of District 10, Cale Pierce. So again, thank you to everybody involved. Thanks again.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And yesterday I too had the privilege of attending the Ice Walk in Lennox Island. I have to tell you what an honor it was to be invited into the Lennox Island community. And I had the pleasure of walking beside Tim Bernard, Bernard, sorry, and we were talking about how we both have the same last name, but how it's pronounced similarly in French and in Mi'kmaq. And as we walked, it was a silent walk, and at different parts, he would share a story with me about his walks across the ice and some close calls that he had and when there was open water. And as we walked through the community, he would point out different areas and tell us just different stories. He was born in Charlottetown, I believe, but grew up on Lennox Island. And so walking beside the elder made it a little bit even more special. And as I walked, there was something really special about stepping off the bridge and onto the road, even though it was just the middle of the walk. And I had a moment where I, of course, as I always do, and got quite emotional. And I just wanted to reach over and give Tim a hug and just say sorry. And anyway, it was such a beautiful and powerful day, and the spirit of reconciliation and moving forward together was really evident, and the feast at the end was just icing on the cake, and so it was lovely. I also would love to just take a moment to congratulate all of the Music PEI nominees and winners. Since there have been a few named already that I was going to name, I'm just going to say a special congratulations to Kinley for her award. Kinley's a good friend. Also, today, Mr. Speaker, I'd been in touch with Daniel Pierce. He reached out to me when he heard the advocacy work that I do for children living with trauma and abuse. And so he sent me a message and said, how can I get all of the books to all of the members of the legislature? And so I just received my copy today. I'm breaking the cycle of silence, and I look forward to digging into this. I know it will be a difficult read. If anyone watching would like to borrow this after, I'm happy to lend that to you. I have two quick more things. I just want to say a quick congratulations to the Charlottetown team for the PEI Curling Club champions. On the women's team, we have Shelley Bradley, Amanda Power, Pat Quilty, Alea Quilty, and Jody Murphy. And on the men's team from the Silver Fox Curling Club in Summerside, Jonathan Green and Tim Hawk and Mike Spencer and Darren Higgins. And last but not least, I this morning was invited to participate in a panel for positive parenting from two homes, from which I did the children's program as a school counselor and now continue to do the adult facilitation of the adult program currently. And so the student well-being teams, that's current, when we do it in the schools with the children, it's the school counselor that delivers that programming with one of two facilitators. There's only two facilitators in all of PEI. So it made the program really special when you actually got to host it, and it has such amazing benefits, which we got to talk about this morning. And so great news that the student well-being teams, I hate to add more to their plates, but really great that schools they're going to be even more part of the school community, and we can get those services to our children in faster numbers and in bigger numbers. So sorry for the long-winded greetings. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, West Royalty.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a great pleasure to rise and say hello to everybody in District 14 and to send a couple special notes out. I too want to congratulate Keisha Ryan on her scholarship award. You know, she focused on a few different areas: discrimination, social justice, and BIPOC issues, and what an amazing talent. So congratulations to her, and I know her parents, Paulette and Joe, are probably very, very proud. And two, as well, all the PEI Music Award winners, but especially Scott Parsons, who has done an amazing amount of storytelling and has almost kept a history of a population alive for a very long time. So Scott Parson, congratulations on this very, very special award. And last night, speaking of awards, last night the Hip Hop Recording Artist of the Year, Vince the Messenger, played at just downtown here to a sold-out show at the Trailside. So I was able to go to that show and support him, and it was a fantastic show. And he came with an entourage, so I want to just shout out his entourage, and it was Obimi, Radley. You know, and the person with the most creative name of all, I think, is, and he kind of stole the show, was Slim the Garbage Man. Had a good night, and as well as Everybody Keeps It Together, DJ Nemo. And I think the night was, it was funny because a group of Vince works at Nimrod's, because, you know, that's what you have to do when you're a recording artist. So he works at Nimrod's, and the funniest moment was when he brought all his Nimrod's colleagues in, and he sang a song dedicated to pizzas called Sauce on the Side. So that was very much a highlight of the night. So it was just a great night, and I want to say congratulations. A sold-out show again. Congratulations to the group.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Brighton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You may have noticed I don't comment much about sports, but that doesn't mean I don't like a good competition, and I want to congratulate all the award winners and nominees to the Music PEI Award on this weekend. I know many of the winners, and I'm looking forward to them sometime soon to be able to listen to them up close, and I'm hoping that pretty soon we'll be allowed to dance with our legally married partner as well. On another award, I would like also to congratulate the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure on their award for their displaced left turn design for the St. Peter's Road and bypass intersection. The department will receive the Lieutenant Governor's Award for Engineering Achievement at a future ceremony. Some people may have heard me criticize roundabouts and bypasses in the past. I have indeed done that, but that was never about the professional work of the civil servants in the department. In fact, I worked directly with the department for 40 years, the first project being this very building we are in, and decades more working with the department on seniors' homes, schools, and the Prince County Hospital. In every case, I have found the department and staff totally professional and fair in its design decisions, tender process, and excellent and impartial supervision. So a heartfelt congratulations to the staff of the department for the excellency of their work. As for the political management, we'll talk about that some other day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from O'Leary Inverness, third party whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too want to add my voice, I guess, to the event that was held yesterday in my district, I might add, Mr. Speaker. And it actually wasn't the first time that I've made that walk. I did do that campaign on a couple of occasions, Mr. Speaker, maybe not across the bridge part, but from the store up to the school, Mr. Speaker. But I certainly want to give a congratulations to Chief Charlene Bernard and the councillors Madeleine Sark and Richard Guimond, as well as Jamie Thomas, for putting on a great event and hosting a great event. And anytime I do get the opportunity to go to Lennox Island, food is always involved, Mr. Speaker, whether it's a St. Anne's Sunday lobster supper, or whether it's the feast that they had last night or yesterday, Mr. Speaker, at the Ice Walk. And I think another moment that was somewhat powerful for me that wasn't mentioned was the presentation by Wade McKinnon on behalf of PEI law enforcement of a taxidermied American bald eagle, Mr. Speaker. And I know I'd had the chance to sit with Madeleine and Richard and Chief Darlene, and they were quite pleased with that. I think it's the second bald eagle that they have on the Lennox Island community, and I think they were looking at a special location at the band office, but I don't know if that's been totally determined yet, Mr. Speaker. And I also would have to add in Tara McLean's song, Mr. Speaker. Dennis Ellsworth, I think Tim Chason, and a couple of people from Lennox Island, Gilbert Sark, had the chance to perform together. I know Gilbert was quite impressed with the opportunity to perform on stage with Tara McLean. And I guess for me, one of the things that sort of struck note in the walk, I guess especially, was that as a person who's lived in the community for many, many years, I would go to the Tyne Valley Rink and I'd watch people like Charlie Sark play hockey for the Tyne Valley Clover Farmers, as well as playing against Angus Sark and some of these people in minor hockey and as a kid. And this would be before the bridge was built. I never ever thought that all those people, after they play hockey at the rink in Tyne Valley, would have to go across the ice to actually get home, Mr. Speaker. And so that kind of hit home a bit for me, and the extra challenge that those particular performers had. And if you think of Charlie Sark, usually those games of the Tyne Valley Clover Farmers would play in the O'Leary Maroons or Tignish Aces. Those games would be fairly late at night. And you think about, that some of those people had to walk home across the ice to get their game done. So for me, that was sort of something that struck home that I never really thought of as a person who lived in the community for many years. Just never thought about my neighbors would have to, some of my neighbors would have to endure that. So with that, Mr. Speaker, welcome everybody on behalf of Eastlink that are looking back at this proceedings today from the Riding of O'Leary Inverness. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise in the House today. I want to say hello to everyone watching from District 4, Belfast Mary River. It's a beautiful day. We saw some traps on the wharf on the way in here today and saw some tractors on the highway, and that's always a good sign, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Music PI Awards, I'll have to also stand and congratulate all of the members that either live in or grew up in the district that I represent. Dylan Menzie, of course, 3 awards, including SOCAN Songwriter of the Year. I know his parents are very proud, as is all his family. Amanda Jackson Band, Amanda, who lives in the district, and Todd McLean, who's with her there, and Dale, of course. Colin Buchanan, who was ordered, I think, Producer of the Year, and Fran McBurney was mentioned earlier by Leader of the Opposition. Fran, who is a wonderful community person, the music teacher at Belfast School for years and has retired. I always found it fascinating. She would go to UPEI to accompany the most accomplished and then come out and play the piano for the Lions Club so we could all sing along. And she was also the organist at Belfast at St. John's Presbyterian Church, as well as the Kirk, and had the pleasure and the privilege of being in the choir in both of those locations over the years. Just a wonderful person, and I really want to congratulate Fran for all the hard work that she's put out there to help. And I'm assuming, people like Dylan and Colin would not be the musicians they are if it wasn't for Fran McBurney at Belfast School. So congratulations to her. Also to Kinley, who I've known for a long, long time. And all those who are nominated. It's really, we have a wonderful community of musicians here in PEI, and we all should be very proud. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Did I miss anyone? Well, everybody gets up and talks about hockey or basketball or curling or Toronto or Montreal, or I won't mention Boston, but Eastern Kings Sportsplex in Surrey had a real busy weekend this weekend with ringette, with under 16, under 19, 16, 14, 12-year-old teams. And Team Dingwall took the gold and from Surrey, and Team Peters was the silver runner-up from Surrey. And honourable members, under 14 gold team, McPhee, they won gold for the provincials. And under 12, Team McDonald also won gold for the provincials. So we had a busy weekend in Surrey as ringette, as always. Ringette, I always liked the game of ringette. I found it to be a skating game, passing game, and a lot of lovely skaters came out of ringette. I've been watching ringette now. It started in Surrey, I believe it was in 1979, 80, 81 season there. So, and there was a lot of good skaters came out of there. And now I'm seeing the grandchildren of some of the ones that started in the 80s. So I'm starting to show my age, but it was a great weekend, and the traffic around Surrey was great. So, it just goes to show you, even hockey tournaments will boost your economy in your district. So if you can host any kind of a tournament, if it's a basketball tournament, a hockey tournament, a curling tournament. Actually, our year-end curling is coming up as we speak. We have a hockey tournament there now. So, this all adds to the economy of our island, especially now with COVID. So I'm not going to take up much more of your time. I appreciate it. I just thought I had to get up when everybody was talking about hockey and curling, and so I thought I'd mention the ringette. And actually, one of our own pages, Brooklyn McGuinness, is one of the gold medal winners. And I was going to wait for Brooklyn to be in the house, but everybody was talking today, so I had to get up. Thank you. Member statement. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I often stand in this House and speak about what a warm and welcoming province we live in. Every day I wake up feeling gratitude that I live on this beautiful island, filled with people from all backgrounds and all walks of life, who love this province as much as I do. When I walk into this legislature, I'm aware of the immense privilege that I carry as one of 27 residents who get to represent our province and the people who live here. But I'm also aware of the immense privilege that I carry every day as a white man, and the benefits and opportunities that I have been awarded simply because of that fact. Because while it is true that we live in a province filled with kind and welcoming people, it's also true that our province has a long history of discrimination, of xenophobia, and of racism. From the moment that white settlers arrived on these shores, colonizing Ebiquit, our island has been steeped in white supremacy, genocide, and violence against Black, Brown, Indigenous, and people of color. This insidious part of our history certainly does not end with the arrival of white settlers. Since then, racism and white supremacy have persisted in our relationship with the First Peoples of this land, in the treatment of Black Islanders, the erasure of the bog, for example, and in the racism towards Lebanese immigrants in the 50s and 60s, and most recently, in the rise of anti-Asian sentiment as our province welcomes more and more immigrants from all around the world. This is, sadly, part of who we are, an undeniable, shameful, and difficult part of who we are. But it doesn't have to be who we can become. It does not have to define the island that we can build together. Mr. Speaker, we must call out xenophobia wherever we see it, no matter who extols it. A realistic telling of our island history where we acknowledge the painful along with the joyful, and where we decenter white men who have always been the storytellers of our past, will set us on the course for a better future. Aside from the Mi'kmaq people, we are all immigrants to this island, whether we came here 6 generations ago or 6 days ago. If we want to live up to the claims that we love and wish to protect this island, that means including and protecting everybody who calls this place home. A truly rich island means welcoming a diversity of voices and experiences, where our culture is reflective and inclusive of all of its people. Our island culture has always been a living, dynamic, and ever-changing entity, and that's precisely what makes it such a special place to live. I call upon my colleagues in this House to join me in using the power and responsibility entrusted to us by islanders to play our part to call out hateful language and exclusionary tactics, and to amplify the voices of the BIPOC community here on Prince Edward Island. We can and we must do better. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Montague-Kilmuir, the government whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Continuing on with the topic of provincial championships, this past weekend, Hockey PEI hosted their Island Championships, and I would like to take this time to acknowledge the Montague Norseman U15 AA boys' victory in the Island Final this past weekend at the APM Centre in Cornwall. The team is based out of Montague, but is made up of players from across Kings County. They had a very strong regular season, finishing in a tie for first with a record of 18, 2 and 3. In the playoff round robin, they finished second behind Pownal with 2 wins and a tie, and charged past O'Leary with a 3-1 victory in the semi-final. Mr. Speaker, they went on to defeat Pownal 3-1 in the championship game Sunday, with strong goaltending from Thomas Doucette and goals from Tyson McGrath, Liam Runnahan, and Thomas McCachran. Mr. Speaker, this team is coached by Alan McDonald, Paul McDonald, Grace McDonald, and Daniel McDonald. Quite a few McDonalds there. Alan and Paul have both coached this team for a number of years and are all highly regarded by former players. They are excellent role models to youth in Kings County and have donated countless hours over the years. A special thank you to both of them. And Mr. Speaker, while also up, I'd like to acknowledge the Montague U18A girls team, who unfortunately came up just short in the finals against Summerside on Sunday at Credit Union Place. They're coached by Owen McNeil, Taylor Gillis, and Michael McNeil. The girls had a very successful regular season, finishing second in their island-wide league. And Mr. Speaker, the U15 AA boys title is the first island title for a Kings County team in this division that I can recall in 10 or more years. It is an amazing accomplishment and something that the players and coaches will remember for years to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable leader of the third party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our province is in a growing healthcare crisis. Across our island, more than 16,000 people do not have a family doctor. And that means more than 16,000 difficult stories and people who are worried about their health and well-being. Mr. Speaker, the situation keeps getting worse. Yesterday, the number of islanders waiting for a family doctor grew again, and that pattern just keeps repeating itself. And while the Minister and the Premier may deny there is a crisis, it is hard to explain that viewpoint to senior citizens who need care or to young families who want to raise their children in a healthy, responsible way. And it is quite unfortunate that instead of taking on this issue with the hard work that is needed, we keep hearing slogans and excuses. Last year it was hubs. This year it's medical homes and neighborhoods. Next year I expect government will start talking about patient surpluses instead of doctor shortages, because storytelling appears more important to this government than the hard work that is really required. Over the next couple of days, members of the Liberal caucus will concentrate a lot of our limited time on the doctor shortage situation. And we will do this because we know that there are more than 16,000 individual stories out there, and that every last one of these people deserve to be heard. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
End of member statements. Questions by members, starting with response to questions taken as notice. No? For our first question, I'll call on the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks so much, Mr. Speaker. Openness and transparency are words that we hear a lot, and with good reason. They are important principles of good government. Our legislature and indeed the public cannot hold government to account without an adequate knowledge of what's actually going on. And many people are concerned across Prince Edward Island that access to what is going on is not as easy as it should be. Question to the Premier. Why are islanders, whether it's legislative office staff or members, part of the media, or indeed private citizens, waiting unprecedented lengths of time to receive government information?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Honourable Leader for the question. I do believe that openness and transparency are the fundamentals of good democracy. I think that we all have to remember, as has been said in here many times, that we're just merely representatives of the people. The information that we deal with needs to be protected in some cases to protect the privacy of those individuals, but it is the information of the people. So I think we try our hardest, Mr. Speaker. I'd be interested to see where the leader is going, just in terms of where the stalemate might be, but I'm committed to openness and transparency, and we'll try to help in every way that I can. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. 3 years ago, during a review of the FOIP legislation, our office made a long list of recommendations to leapfrog our province to the front of the line when it comes to access to information, to become leaders in transparency and accountability. And today we have a new administration with apparently a new commitment to being open. A question again to the Premier. What has your government done to date to improve access to information? And what are the specifics of your administration's planned FOIP review?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the specifics of trying to review any of the processes of government are to try to make it as the best that it can be. The Honourable Leader has been here longer than me, and he has extensively more experience when it comes to the FOIP legislation than I do, admittedly. I think that we are committed as a government to trying to make that process as easily accessible information-wise as possible. I think there's a challenge within government just in dedicating the proper resources within each department that we're trying to work on an individual basis. I was part of a government, Mr. Speaker, as an employee and an advisor that implemented the FOIP legislation, which I think was long overdue and needed. And I would like to try to work with all partners to make it the best it can be for Islanders. And I think all governments in this seat, Mr. Speaker, should appreciate very, very active and open and transparent level of government.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. And of course, the balance that legislation of this type is trying to achieve is between the access to information and the legitimate protection of private information that's quite appropriately kept locked up. However, it seems to me that the long delays and the obstructive habits that have developed with this administration seem more to have to do with a reluctance to divulge information that should be readily available rather than valid protection of sensitive information. To the Premier, why is your government being so opaque when it comes to to providing information that should be readily available?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I don't believe we are being opaque. There are situations, I think we are all dealing with a situation through the Minister of Agriculture and Land where there was frustrations on all sides of governments in terms of making sure a document can be released that I think all people need to see, Mr. Speaker, but at the same time protect the privacy of those individuals that need to be protected. I know there was some people suggesting that that document should just be released and let it sit there, but at the same time, when I came to government, Mr. Speaker, as the Premier, I did go to work and asked individuals to settle a case against whistleblowers where information of a private nature was distributed without their knowledge, and it was harmful to them, and they rightfully sued the government, and that case was settled, Mr. Speaker. So it is a fine line. The freedom of information and the protection of privacy is a very fine line, but I believe we're doing the best we can, Mr. Speaker, and we'll continue to do so.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thanks. The Premier referred to, I think, as a stalemate, but it's sort of a gridlock situation where information is just getting more and more difficult to get. It becomes a sort of a vicious circle as information gets more tightly protected, leading to more requests, leading to longer delays. So we could provide excess resources, or more resources, I should say, to the APSO office to deal with this, but a far more sensible approach would be to automatically make a range of material available to the public without having to enter into this vortex of opacity, or what's known as proactive disclosure, that releasing of information automatically. This already happens in a lot of jurisdictions and was recommended in our submission a few years ago. A question to the Premier: what materials will you make accessible by default?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I don't believe we're trying to be obstructive in any way. I do believe there's a balance of what can be provided in the time frame in which it is provided, and I think we can all agree to disagree sometimes on whether that process is as good as it can be, and I think we need to continue to work to make sure that the process is the best that it can be, Mr. Speaker. But I don't believe we're sitting on any information because we don't want to get it out there. Any information that is legally to be provided, we do, Mr. Speaker. We're bound by law to do that, and we do. I know it's a frustrating process, and I know there's a lot more information that people from all walks of life are trying to gain from government, Mr. Speaker, which is a good thing. But proactive disclosure, I think, is a good idea. I think this legislation is maturing, and it needs to continue to mature, and I keep a very open mind to that, and would deal with the experts in my department and beyond to make sure we can do that legally. But yeah, I think that would be a great idea, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Belvedere.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the official opposition budget ask from last year, we sought financial support for the PEI Community Sector Network. This is the sector council for the non-profit and charitable sector. When I met with the previous Minister of Social Development and Housing and his team for an update on our asks, they advised that rather than provide the operational funding that was requested, they were going to fund a study to get current labour market data and economic impact analysis of the sector. Can the current Minister of Social Development and Housing please provide the House with an update on that study, which was due to be completed by the end of this fiscal year?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks for the question, member, because I think this is an important study, and it's one we're anxiously awaiting in the department as well. And that, unfortunately, is the update. We're still looking forward to receiving the report and working with the network as it establishes its strategic direction. We are going to put substantial investments into the community sector network over the next few years. That is the plan, with more information coming on that front. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, Belvedere.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The community sector is the third largest employer in the province. The last time we had data, it was employing at least 6,500 employees, providing essential programs and services that government cannot. This sector network would provide a voice for this sector. Can the Minister please advise who is conducting the study and when you expect to have that? What next steps would be taken from that study?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I may have to come back with that information about exactly some of those details, but I should point out that when it comes to the community sector network, it is something in social development housing we take very seriously. And as I said, I'm looking forward to announcing some funding over the next couple of years. I know we've been providing funding for the project manager in order to move this RFP along and manage the project. And in fact, I believe we've been working with rural development to help fund the report itself. So again, I'll get back with some of that information, but I should also point out that we do currently provide financial supports for many of the community sector network members. I have a whole list of about 16 of them here on my page that I won't read right now, but thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Alternative Care Program is designed to support friends or family of children whose parents are not able to raise them for various reasons. The Leader of the Official Opposition received a letter from the Minister of Social Development and Housing dated February 24th, 2021, where we were informed there was a review being conducted of the program. And I'm going to quote a section here. The Department of Social Development and Housing has been working to ensure the program meets the goals set out by the original pilot while focusing on the needs of children under a child protection lens. Question to the Minister of Social Development and Housing. What were the goals of this pilot and how is the program doing at meeting these goals currently?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I must say that this is a very important area, and it's an area that I will frankly, I'll come honest, I'm very much getting up to speed on, and I would like to bring some detailed information on back on that and where we're at and some of the detailed goals of the pilot. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. According to your letter that you sent, 36% of these households are led by grandparents, and there are 2 being led by great-grandparents. And these are only the people currently enrolled in the program, and we know that there are many more. These are people who have raised their own children. They have come to a point in their lives where I'm sure they did not imagine being back in the position of raising children again. Apparently, one of the requirements for being eligible for this program is that there must be an open child protection file for that child. It seems odd to me that we would require that children be in danger to that extent before we step in to support. Question to the Minister of Social Development and Housing, is that indeed a requirement for eligibility? And if so, can you please explain why?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Alternative Care Provider Program indeed was launched as a pilot, and that's where I was a little confused on the last question, because I'm treating it as a full program as opposed to a pilot going forward. And when it comes to caregivers being eligible, indeed, having the children in the care of or having a child protection case open is still one of the criteria. But we're working with providing things like the kinship program in parallel with the alternative care program that can help with some of those. And as always, Mr. Speaker, the goal of social development and housing in the department is to help people as much as possible, and we'll always work with individual cases on a case-by-case basis to provide the supports needed.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And one of the concerns we're hearing is that these case-by-case things are contradictory in the information that people receive. And I didn't get an answer to the question as to if that was indeed a requirement and why. So my question was why. Having a policy is important for consistency and fairness in a program. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition has been asking for a copy of the policy that would clarify this issue since last year, and we have seen nothing to date. Question to the Minister of Social Development and Housing. Will you table, now that it's no longer a pilot, will you table the existing policy immediately?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And when it comes to the policy for the alternative care program, I think that's something and we had some discussion question period today about being open and transparent, and I will go back to the department and I will definitely strive to bring that policy forward as soon as possible.
The honourable member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are plenty of reasons for a non-disclosure agreement, but more and more jurisdictions are taking a second look at the ethics of asking women to sign an NDA in cases of sexual harassment and assault. One of the concerns is that non-disclosure provisions can be used to prevent victims of harassment from seeking justice or from warning others who might be subjected to the same harassment. Question to the Justice Minister. How are you ensuring that organizations are not using NDAs to prevent a victim of harassment from reporting objectionable conduct to law enforcement or regulators?
Minister of Justice, Public Safety, and Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and this is a very sensitive issue, Mr. Speaker, and of course, we have to think of the victims in these cases, Mr. Speaker, and with this, we are in conversations with the Crown Attorney, Mr. Speaker, that works with this, and we will continue to look at this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's difficult to understand the scope of this problem if organizations are under no obligation to provide information about any harassment settlements. A strong protection against this kind of inappropriate use of NDAs is to ensure that the right to report is included in any and all NDAs. This allows the signer to report unlawful activities such as sexual harassment even if an NDA is signed. Question to the Minister of Justice. Have you considered creating requirements for people or organizations to include the right to report in any NDAs that they use and to disclose to a government agency any harassment or discrimination settlements so the province can understand the scope of this problem?
The Honourable Minister of Justice, Public Safety, and Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as the member Cross said, there's a huge scope to this problem, Mr. Speaker. And I will take this under advisement, Mr. Speaker, and I'll bring that to answer back in the next few days. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The problem is we really don't know the scope of this problem. Question to the Minister of Justice. Does the government currently use non-disclosure provisions in any settlement agreements they sign?
The Honourable Minister of Justice, Public Safety, and Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Not that I'm aware of. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Summerside, Wilmot.
Mr. Speaker, I'll ask the Minister to look into that and bring that back to the House. Mr. Speaker, it's a catch-22 because the money survivors of sexual assault and harassment may receive from signing a non-disclosure agreement is often what enables them to get out of that situation. We need to put tools in place that would support these individuals, and then we need to have a serious discussion about what place non-disclosure agreements in the case of sexual harassment have in 2021. Question to the Minister of Justice and the Attorney General. You said we need to do better for women. What will your next steps be to improve access to justice for victims of sexual harassment?
The Honourable Minister of Justice, Public Safety, and the Attorney General.
Thank you, Member, for that question. It's a very important question, too, Mr. Speaker. This would require a lot of research, Mr. Speaker, and understanding of the scope and impacts, Mr. Speaker, but it's something that the Department of Justice will look at, Mr. Speaker, and we hope to move forward. And the member is right. It is about the victim here, Mr. Speaker, and we have to be focused on that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Tyne Valley, Sherbrooke.
Mr. Speaker, previously in this House, when I asked the former Minister of Health about the closure of the Psychiatric Urgent Care Clinic, or PUCs, he was adamant, absolutely adamant, Mr. Speaker, that while the PUC at Hillsborough Hospital had closed, the one at Prince County Hospital remained and would remain open. Question to the Minister of Health, is the PUC at Prince County Hospital still open and fully operational?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. As the member is aware, certainly the psychiatric urgent care clinics were put in place in response to COVID-19, specifically with regard to the clinic, psychiatric urgent care clinic at Prince County Hospital, Mr. Speaker. It has been, I guess the word I would use is it's absorbed by the Prince County Hospital Emergency Department, but with similar processes, very similar processes in place, Mr. Speaker, to what the PCH PUC previously did have. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Tyne Valley, Sherbrooke.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. So there's some sort of secret absorption process. We don't know exactly what that looks like. Again, Mr. Speaker, we're seeing this government treat mental health services like an afterthought. There's been no public announcement about the PCH puck closure and no rationale really for providing why this happened. This is a service, Mr. Speaker, that was working well, that was effectively helping those experiencing a mental health crisis to get the help they need in a timely and effective manner. Question to the Minister of Health: when did the puck at PCH close and why?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And like the honourable members, certainly the feedback that I received even previous to coming into my current ministry, it was very positive. And I think that we always have to review what worked best and how we can make improvements on those things. So I'll have to say, Mr. Speaker, that as Minister, I am open to looking at what was working the best. Having said that too, though, Mr. Speaker, I think, you know, we are doing evaluations. We're looking at how improvements can be made. And with regard to changes at Prince County Hospital, as well as the puck at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, evaluations are ongoing with regard to the delivery of services. And I, as Minister, am open to making adjustments based on those evaluations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member from Tyne Valley, Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And evaluations of the pucks can't be ongoing because they've already been closed. Mr. Speaker, it's no secret that I have been very critical of choices made by the previous Minister of Health in his failure to prioritize mental health and addictions and in closing some essential services over the course of the pandemic. But at least he was honest and open about his bad choices. Question to the Minister of Health: not telling the public about the PCH puck being closed, confusion and misinformation about the Administrator and Mental Health Review Board, and a non-stop flip-flop roller coaster of misinformation about the mobile mental health units. Why does it seem like every day government's inaction and misdirection on mental health and addictions gets worse and worse?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I will have to say that I won't always agree with everything that the honourable member has to say, but I certainly will agree with your comment with regard to my predecessor of him being honest. Absolutely. I would like to point out as well, though, Mr. Speaker, just for clarification, when I said the evaluation, the monitoring of changes that were made both at Prince County Hospital and the Queen Elizabeth Hospital on the pucks, what I was referring to there was the evaluation with regard to the changes that have been made at both Prince County Hospital and at the Queen Elizabeth. With regard to the mobile mental health response teams, Mr. Speaker, it's been this is the third administration that has been putting this forward. And I do give credit to the previous ones for planting that seed. But we are working together, and we will get it done, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very
Member
much.
from Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In King and Dawson versus Government of PEI, the Chief Justice David Jenkins of the Court of Appeal wrote, and I quote, "I take this opportunity to lament the inaction by the legislative and executive branches of government. For 2 decades, spanning a number of government administrations, the courts and judiciary have sought, without success, the creation of class action legislation. This would be an easy fix that would provide residents of the province a needed tool for meaningful access to justice. Mr. Speaker, I agree with the Chief Justice that Islanders have waited far too long. A question to the Minister of Justice and Public Safety. When will government finally bring forward class action legislation?"
The Honourable Minister of Justice, Public Safety and the Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and of course we always enjoy and hear from the Chief Justice, Mr. Speaker, and he's right, Mr. Speaker, and we're looking at that legislation right now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Third Party.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, my question today is to the Premier. Recently, I've heard from a couple in Eastern PEI expressing concerns with the lack of access to a family doctor. These fine people have lived in the community their entire life, and following the departure of their local doctor, have now found themselves on the patient registry for a very long time. One has very specific health needs that require regular attention, and the other has the needs of an aging person. Yet they are still without a doctor. Question to the Premier. These individuals with specific health needs believe they are facing a crisis. Do you agree with them that our healthcare access crisis is worsening?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable leader for the question, and not having known exactly who the individuals are, I'll try to be generic in my response without knowing their personal situation, but I'd be happy to learn more about it offline, Mr. Speaker. What we are trying to do for all islanders, including these two individuals from the eastern part of the province, is to make sure that we have a health care delivery service in Prince Edward Island that meets their needs. In the past, Mr. Speaker, particularly a number of years ago, I think there was a belief that that service can only be offered by a family doctor. What we're seeing across the region, across the country, and what we're trying to implement here is a more collaborative approach to the primary health care delivery in this province, Mr. Speaker. And I think that our goal is to immediately try to make sure the services required by that couple that mentioned by the third party is to be able to be delivered, Mr. Speaker, in a collaborative environment with the family doctor being at the heart of that service. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. These islanders have lived in their community their entire life, and still they struggle to find a doctor. As one ages into their later years, you require increased access to a doctor, whether it be for specialized treatment or medical refills and checkups. It appears there is no real plan to address this crisis, and we have received no details on a solution to reduce the growing registry, which now sits at 16,573. Question to the Premier: how long should these islanders expect to wait before they can obtain access to a doctor?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it is my hope that these individuals don't have to wait very long to get access to health care service, Mr. Speaker. But I have to be open and honest with those individuals and with all islanders. And for 30 years in this province, we haven't been able to deliver on the fake promise of a doctor for every islander, Mr. Speaker. And what we're talking about is to be realistic of what the needs of islanders are, and that is the need for accessible health care service in a collaborative environment, Mr. Speaker, as close to your house as possible, and that is what we're working toward. Family doctors will be at the heart of all of these things, Mr. Speaker, but I think it's just the realization of the environment that we're in, the environment that our medical professionals want to work in, Mr. Speaker, and the realities that we face as a province. But I want to get those two individuals health care services and access to them as quickly as possible.
The Honourable Leader of the third party, a second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There appears to be no consistency in how or when people come off the patient registry. We know there are families and individuals who have not lived on PEI as long as these individuals I am referring to, yet they have a family doctor, but these individuals don't. Islanders don't have any knowledge if their number on the registry is approaching or if they still face years to come without access to a doctor. Question to the Premier: why are so many families facing year-long waits on the patient registry when others are receiving faster access to doctors?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the political pessimist in me would say is because governments before me were too slow to act to the realities of the changing environment, Mr. Speaker. But I would say, this is an issue that is important to all islanders. Our goal, as all legislators in this province, should be to provide the best possible service from a healthcare delivery perspective that we can for all islanders, Mr. Speaker, and as close to their home community as possible would be an added incentive within that, Mr. Speaker, and that is what we're working toward. This is a challenging file for sure, but we are putting forward our approach to a more collaborative practice, so the individual couple involved, if they need a prescription refilled, Mr. Speaker, would not necessarily have to go see a family doctor to do that, Mr. Speaker, but they need access to a quality collaborative healthcare delivery model, Mr. Speaker, and that's what we're working toward. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, West Royalty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question to the Premier. I too have also been in touch with an island family who has expressed their concerns regarding lack of access to a family doctor. This family moved to PEI a couple of years ago, purchased a small business, and has since worked very hard to make Prince Edward Island their home. However, one thing that has stopped them from putting down roots on the island is a lack of access to a family doctor. This family placed themselves on the patient registry soon after arriving in Prince Edward Island, and after almost 2 years, still have no prospects for getting a family doctor. Question to the Premier. This family is seeking to make Prince Edward Island their home, but a lack of access to a doctor is deterring them from doing so. For this family, it is a crisis. And the crisis for them is, should I stay or should I go? So what do they do?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would encourage the couple to stay because this is a wonderful place to live, work, and raise a family. And I would also say that there is a government that is here trying to make sure that they have access to adequate health care, Mr. Speaker, in this province. And the model that we have been talking about that is supported by professionals across this country, Mr. Speaker, that is in place across many jurisdictions in this country, is one that will include family doctors, Mr. Speaker. It will include nurse practitioners. It will include RNs and the bevy of health care services that we provide, Mr. Speaker, so that when you come in to a location in need of healthcare service, Mr. Speaker, that healthcare service will be there for you. If a family doctor is required in that service, that doctor would be there, Mr. Speaker, and that's the model that we're trying to put forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, West Worthing.
And I find their story very concerning, and I'm sure there are many island families in a similar situation. For the 16,573 islanders who remain on the registry, this is a real and present crisis in the delivery of health care. We often talk about retention of talent in the workforce. However, we're seeing that a lack of access to a family doctor is serving as a direct deterrent in retaining professionals in Prince Edward Island. The only thing stopping them from making this their forever home is a lack of access to a family doctor. Question to the Premier, how long should this family expect to wait before they can obtain access to a family doctor?
The Honourable Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I will reiterate the answer that I've given to the opposition for a couple of weeks now, even if they don't appreciate the realities of the situation that we're in. And for you talks about the retention and recruitment of professionals, Mr. Speaker, a big part of that, if you talk to people in our bioscience community, they need access to health care, Mr. Speaker. And a healthcare provision that includes doctors, nurse practitioners, RNs, LPNs, pharmacists, Mr. Speaker, social workers, all of these individuals, Mr. Speaker, who have a scope of practice that they can offer to all islanders. And that's the model that we are approaching, Mr. Speaker. So yes, I think the overall recruitment and retention of professionals in this province is contingent upon a successful primary healthcare delivery model, Mr. Speaker, and that includes the healthcare professionals that work within it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Charlottetown, West Ridley, your second supplementary.
As I noted in the previous set of questions, there appears to be no consistency on how people come off the patient registry. We know some people have been successful in obtaining new doctors in short order, whereas others have spent years on the registry with no prospect of getting off. This lack of transparency and information regarding the process of coming off the patient registry has created a situation where there are winners and losers. Question to the Premier, will you commit to reviewing the process for coming off the registry so to ensure transparency and fairness for the 16,573 islanders who remain on the list?
The Honourable Premier.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think the one consistency that all islanders should and must demand is access to quality health care services if and when they need it, Mr. Speaker. And whether that's provided by a family doctor, by a nurse practitioner, or many, many, many of the health care professionals in this province who do wonderful work, Mr. Speaker, that should be the goal, and that is the goal. As we'll learn more and we talk about our community homes, Mr. Speaker, we will be attaching people to community homes so they have access to that service. So the answer to the question from the Honourable Member, which is a good question, I hope that will happen as soon as possible, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from O'Leary-Inverness.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this government just loves to tell stories. And I love listening to stories, Mr. Speaker, but I love listening to stories from my constituents, Mr. Speaker. And I'm getting quite a sequence of stories coming from my constituents on the follies of healthcare, Mr. Speaker. Recently, I've heard from a constituent, one who typically obtains a breast exam and biopsies at the Prince County Hospital in Summerside. However, during her latest appointment, she was told the procedure could not be done at the Prince County Hospital, and if she still wanted the service, she would have to go to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Now, this person from my district had traveled to Charlottetown to receive the procedure, increasing the time, cost, stress involved with obtaining the service, and she was not happy. Question to the Minister of Health. Do you think that this is an acceptable situation, and when will breast biopsy services resume at the Prince County Hospital in Summerside?
The Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and appreciate the honourable member bringing this forward to me. I'm not sure how long ago it would have been that the honourable member was reached out to by his constituent, but anyway, yes, we need to provide as much as possible services as close to home as possible. Will there occasionally be interruptions for a variety of reasons, Mr. Speaker? Certainly our goal would be not to have those interruptions, but they will occur. But again, Mr. Speaker, our priority has to be able and to provide to the best quality health care to Islanders as close as home as possible. And with that, I would more than welcome the opportunity to sit down and have a discussion with the honourable member on this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from O'Leary-Inverness.
Mr. Speaker, the last question was just one situation, Mr. Speaker. I've heard numerous issues regarding lack of access to specialist services at Prince County Hospital. Another concern or story that I've heard surrounds access to general internists, which offers colonoscopy services. And I've spoken with that constituent who is seeking a referral from his family doctor. However, due to the shortage of specialists at the Prince County Hospital, this individual's family doctor has been unable to secure an appointment with a specialist. This individual now sits in limbo waiting for an appointment, presumably at some other location that they're not used to going to, and further removed from their home community, potentially even off island. Minister of Health, do you believe this is an acceptable situation, and when will general internist services resume at Prince County Hospital?
Thank you very much, Mr. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, ongoing, the staff in the department are always recruiting for vacancies. And with regard specifically to the honourable member's question, starting tomorrow, there is a replacement for Dr. Connie Orr coming to Prince County Hospital. And like I say, starting tomorrow, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member from O'Leary-Inverness, your second supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is helpful news. I appreciate that. While government may continue to ignore these issues for its own particular purposes, to the Islanders experience disruptions to healthcare services, this is a very serious matter. And I have more questions I'll ask even later on this, Mr. Speaker, but we see deteriorating healthcare services on the government's watch, while it's rapidly rising patient registry, backlog to specialists, or to delay in services required by our patients. The situation appears to be particularly concerning at Prince County Hospital, where it is clear staff shortages are having an impact on the delivery of service. Question to our Minister, Phelps, who is from Prince County, I might add. How many physician and specialist vacancies are currently at the Prince County Hospital, and what is your expected timeline to fill these vacancies? How many?
Question, Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'll be happy to bring back the exact number of vacancies that there are at the Prince County Hospital, Mr. Speaker. But I think that we have to look, this isn't a situation, Mr. Speaker, that we found ourselves in overnight. You look at some of the initiatives that we are bringing forward with regard to recruitment. No, we've taken nursing recruitment, the incentives from 1,100 to 5,000. We're looking at improving upon that.
Let the Minister finish.
So at the end of the day, yes, we inherited a little bit of a mess, Mr. Speaker. We are looking at improving. We're working hard at it. We want Islanders to have the best health care. We're expanding scopes of practice. We're doing a whole range of things, Mr. Speaker, that the previous administration, for whatever reason, never even looked at or considered. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Morell-Donagh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we're coming up to the summer season here in Prince Edward Island, and again the conversation arises about safety at our island beaches. I know in District 7 there's upwards of 25, 30 unsupervised beaches, Mr. Speaker. A question to the Minister of Tourism. Would he consider looking at a program to install life-saving devices at unsupervised beaches in PEI?
The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Honourable Member. Good question. Quick story, last summer this come up and was brought to my attention. It was a private beach and somebody got themselves caught in an undertow, and what saved them that day was, I believe he was a 12-year-old boy with a piece of driftwood. So that was the first that this has been on my radar. We are looking at it through the department. There's a couple issues which I can talk further on, but hopefully we can get them rectified and work through it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Morel-Donagh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And that's kind of the examples that I hear. You hear of somebody grabbing something local, like someone else that had a life ring just for play that day, or boats trying to get out. I've heard from the fire department as well on these types of things, Mr. Speaker. I think it's something that we could talk about, getting set up through a fire department or perhaps a local development corporation to have something set up at each of these beaches. Minister, would you consider working with local groups so that we can, even if it's just like a post with a life-saving ring set up there?
The honourable member from Tourism and Culture.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Absolutely, and that's kind of what we're hoping to work towards. There's hundreds of beaches across Prince Edward Island, and we need help doing that. We'd have no issues of coming up the life rings, but we would need fire departments, nonprofits, organizations, communities, cottage owners, anybody that's willing to help us out and to make sure them life rings stay in the post where they are for when they're needed and help us look after them. We'll certainly commit to that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Morel-Donagh, your second supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I see it almost like, I know the Minister of Environment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know I see it like similar to like the Minister of Environment. I know that and Transportation also helps out with beach signage, whether it be piping plumbers or sensitive dune habitat, and they work with private members of society along with other groups too. So I see it. It also raises another question though about the obvious one is about tampering with them, and I wonder to question to the Attorney General and Minister of Justice: do we have any legislation in place now to prevent tampering with life-saving devices? Say it was a life ring or an AED, even at a school or rink. And if we don't, would you consider bringing that in?
The Honourable Minister of Justice, Public Safety and the Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and that's a good question, Mr. Speaker, but that is damage to public property, Mr. Speaker, which is an offence, Mr. Speaker, and I don't know if we need new legislation for that, Mr. Speaker, but any of these cases should be reported, Mr. Speaker, to the police, and so we can take the right appropriate action. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park, final question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On November 26th last year, the Leader of the Official Opposition asked the former Minister of Social Development and Housing about the parameters of the Alternative Caregiver Program. In his answer, the Minister referenced a conversation with Mr. Don Avery, who's a tireless and passionate advocate for this community and has been for many years. Mr. Avery was clear that there was, at least at that time, no necessity for an open custody case in order to qualify for this program, which is what they had been asking for. A question to the Minister of Social Development and Housing: why has this restrictive requirement been brought back?
The Honourable Minister of Social Development and Housing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the member across, I was asking, of course, about the Alternative Care Provider Program earlier in reference to the letter. I've since zeroed in on the letter she was referring to, and of course we talked about doing a review of the policies of that program, and I believe that's exactly one of the policies we're reviewing. I'm looking at my notes, and indeed I have the name Don Avery written down here when I was being briefed on this very important area. So I do look forward to bringing forward the results of that review. I don't have them quite yet, but that is an area I believe we were looking at, and of course we're listening to those who have advocated so hard for this very important program. I know it's helped many children, and of course it's helped the parents who are in recovery eventually gain back access to their children in a much more unobtrusive way than having the province, take them under custody. So thank you, member, and I look forward to getting back to you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
End of question period. Statements by ministers. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Communities.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this has been a difficult year for many in the fishery and aquaculture industries. Entering into 2020, our seafood industry was looking to continue their significant growth and success that they had worked so hard to build. Of course, we know what happened in early 2020 when the COVID-19 pandemic halted almost everything around the world. Mr. Speaker, the uncertainty and restrictions imposed globally were cause for serious concern in the seafood market. While our seafood industry worked extremely hard to take strides in the right direction, restrictions around the world, accompanied with unforeseen circumstances, made it a difficult year for many. Extra work, stress, and financial constraints caused by the pandemic are just some examples of difficulties our fishers and aquacultures were faced with. Mr. Speaker, my department has been working with the fisheries and aquaculture industries to provide the Fisher Assistant Program and the Aquaculture Farm Assistant Program. These programs give fishers, crews, members, families, and aquaculturists access to confidential and professional counseling services to support their mental health and well-being. Over the past year, we have increased the funding to the Aquaculture Alliance and to the Prince Edward Island Fishermen's Association for the delivery of these great programs. We want to ensure that the people in our industries have access to mental health services and assistance that they need. Mr. Speaker, we must do whatever we can to reduce the stigma associated with mental health and ensure people get to help that they need. I want to thank the PEI Fishermen's Association and the PEI Aquaculturist Alliance for their continued support to members in their respective industries through the programs and services they offer. Also, to all fishers and aquaculturists, please reach out when you need help. You are not alone, and there is support available when you need it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke, Opposition Whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's certainly good to hear government recognize the challenges that have been faced by many of our fishers and those in aquaculture during the pandemic. We know that these professions can be stressful at any time, and certainly during COVID we have seen that become even more challenging in many ways. I do want to note that it is my hope that, unlike some other programs that we have seen in mental health and addictions, that this mental health support and Fisher's Assistance Program will not be treated like a checkbox. We must make sure that we are effectively evaluating this program ongoing to ensure that it is meeting the needs of our fishers and those in aquaculture. So that would just be one thing I would like to highlight, but it is great to hear that this is occurring, and I thank government for this support for our fishers. Thank you.
The honourable member from Tignish Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And our fisheries and our agriculture industry here on Prince Edward Island carry a lot of demands and stresses on the fishers, on their families, and on the aquaculture workers. And these stresses can come from numerous different things, such as financial, weather, tight timelines, could be marketing, or what have you. And within the industry, there's a growing recognition of the importance of mental health and understanding that reaching out for help is acceptable. And I have to commend the former Minister of Fisheries, I think it was 2019 maybe, for recognizing and implementing and supporting a program called Fisher's Assistance Program, which provided free counseling to fishers, their families, people in the aquaculture industry, and their families also. So again, this statement today just goes to show that support will continue on, and I do thank the Minister for making this presentation today. Thank you.
End of minister statements, right? Just one. Presenting and receiving petitions. Tabling of documents. No? Reports by committees. Introduction of government bills. Government motions. Orders of the day, government. The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honourable Premier, that the first order of the day be now read.
Shall it carry?
Order number 1, consideration of the estimates in committee.
The Honourable Minister of Finance, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by the Honourable Premier, that this House do now resolve itself into Committee of the Whole House to take into consideration grant of supply to Her Majesty.
Shall it carry? The Honourable Member from Tignish Palmer Road to chair Committee of the Whole House, please.
now in Committee of the Whole House to consider the grant of supply to Her Majesty. A request has been made to bring a stranger onto the floor. Shall it be granted?
Yes.
Honourable members, we had completed the Department of Fisheries and Communities. We are now moving on to page 89, the Employment Development Agency. So that's page 89. No, sorry, I didn't recognize you yet. Would you please state your name and title for answer, please?
Mary Kinsman, Director of Finance and Corporate Services for the Department of Fisheries and Communities.
Thank you very much and welcome. Management. General, appropriations provided for administration of program delivery, budget management, and payment processing. Administration, $7,500. Equipment, $2,700. Materials, supplies, and services, $300. Salaries, $180,400. Travel and training, $6,000. Total general, $196,900. Tyne Valley, Sherbrooke.
Chair, thank you, Chair. So I did have a couple of additional questions under municipal affairs. It's sort of got lost at the end there, I think, with it being close to the end of time. I didn't realize we had passed the section. I'm hoping we can go back just to the previous section for a couple of questions.
To be quite honest, we're on a totally different, we're not even on that part anymore. Right now, we're under the Employment Development Agency. So we passed that whole division, that whole section.
I will say, Chair, that I have no problem meeting with the honourable member after, and if you want to bring your questions forward, I'll get you the answers for them.
Okay, Tyne Valley. Sherbrooke, do you have any questions regarding the Employment Development Agency?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Okay. Improving employment opportunities for workers is, it's a key component of the programs under this agency. I'm wondering, do you gather any information or any data on how many people who do receive jobs through the Employment Development Agency programs, through the adult job programs, if they improve their employment prospects at all after engaging with the program, or if there's any changes year after year for those individuals?
I would have to get that information come back, but we do track who uses the programs, and it's always the goal of the department to assist somebody in finding, better employment or full-time employment. And we work with skills, of course, to ensure that. But the role of the department is to ensure that if we can help somebody better themselves or get a better job, then we try to do that with them.
Tyne Valley, Sherbrooke.
And so can you elaborate on some of the ways that you help individuals in their goals toward improving their employment prospects in the future? So what training or supports are provided to workers who engage with these programs?
Well, thanks, Chair. One of the biggest changes we've made in the last little bit was last year when we changed the Jobs for Youth, where it's instead of the student applying to us and then us placing the student in a position, now the employer can get approved for a position, and then they can find a student, have students directly apply to them. So we can, it's the employer teaming up with the employee to, get somebody that they need for that job, or somebody that might be interested in that job would be a prime example of that.
Tyne Valley, Sherbrooke.
Yeah, no, definitely those were some, I would say, improvements to the Jobs for Youth program, most certainly, and I commend the minister for those changes. My questions are about the adult jobs programs. So if you are providing any training or supports or anything to support those folks in their future employment endeavors.
I can tell you that we don't, the staff that are involved in that, they're our best resource because they know the organizations that are applying for positions and the people that are applying for them. They work very hard to get that employee, the best fit for his education or his abilities, I would say. So, we work with them to try to, as people put in applications for workers, then we try to marry the best fit. But in some cases, you might have person A who's qualified in something, there's just no position available, or nobody has put in an application for that specific skill set. So it's hard. But the department works very closely with them employees and employers to make sure they fit the best to improve themselves.
Tyne Valley, Sherbrooke.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, so it sounds like there aren't really any training or supports available to individuals engaging with this program. You've described that, you know, the process of trying to find the best fit for employment, so that's great. But what is being done beyond that to again to further support individuals who are hired through the Employment Development Agency to improve their future employment prospects and build on their skills?
Well, that's a good question. Like, one thing I think very highly of is giving somebody the ability to better themselves, or giving somebody the ability to further their education. So, you know, it's a direction I'm moving the department towards, or the Employment Development Agency toward, of how can we get individuals more in the workplace on a permanent basis than on a part-time basis. And, you know, any way we can help them with programs or point out different courses that might be available, you know, say through skills or through our different Hong College or them programs, you know, put that information before the applicant or the employee so that they can get that training and better themselves.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Thank you, Chair. In the throne speech, there was mention of the creation of a new agency for workforce development, I believe. So I'm wondering, do you see it impact the work of the Employment Development Agency at all? Is there any overlap there?
I'm not aware of that. Not aware of what you're talking about.
Tyne Valley Sherbrooke.
Oh,
I think
okay.
that's-
Do you want to? Okay, I guess we'll just wait.
we can
So
wait
I guess
until
there's
it's
no
on.
overlap then if you don't know what it, like, you don't, it's not, there's no overlap, it seems, if you don't know what it is. Is there? No. Okay. Okay, that was my question, so that's fine. Thank you, Chair, that's all.
I just have a couple of questions on that. So for the EDA program, is it still, it's for people ages 30 to 65? Is that correct?
Well, we can't discriminate for somebody that wants a job. So, you know, if they're 67 or whatever, then, you know, we try to get them in a position.
Because I have organizations who find it difficult to, because EDA is actually it's a really good program, especially in the, well, I guess anywhere across the island, for nonprofit organizations who are just trying to make ends meet. And they rely on the workforce that are available. And sometimes it's difficult for them to find employees, good employees, so they don't have to retrain all the time, who are being told that they're aged out at 65.
Yeah.
So are you saying that they can actually apply if they're and get accepted if they're over 65?
Well, we can't discriminate against age. So, you know, if they are over that 65 and they apply, then we will.
Okay, so but it's not a determinant as to, okay. And jobs for youth. There's I like the way it works now, I really do, that the students don't have to apply, that the businesses and organizations apply for it. But is there a chance that the MLAs could be given a list of the organizations and businesses that have been approved in their area so that when people come into them, they can give them direction?
You can go online, honorable member, and you can see as the businesses are approved, where the student can apply to.
Okay, and is that done at the same time whenever they're, I guess, revealed to everyone? Or is that a week later or 2 weeks later, or?
If I follow you right, as a company A applies, then it's put on the list. As company B applies and gets approved, then it's put on the list. So it's a ever-ending generating, you know.
Okay, so when the deadline is closed, let's say today.
Tomorrow.
Is it whatever the 30, the end of the month is, whatever it is. Yeah, you're saying then, even maybe possibly next week, there could be some approved and be on that list?
That's right.
Perfect, okay. And O'Leary and Vanessa.
So just looking at your budget there, jobs for youth program, 1.3, it's basically the same as last year's, no increase. I have some concerns about that, because I think this year is going to be a little bit different, that I'm hearing lots of employers are nervous about what the coming year will be. And obviously, I've been telling them to, get your applications in, as the saying goes, but knowing that the budget really isn't any different, I'm really wondering about that. And I'm also getting students that are kind of wondering too, because they don't know if some of their private sector positions are going to come back, and there's just a lot of questions there. So I really would wonder, how much flexibility do you have in your budget to deal with that? Now, last year was fine, but I'm really wondering this year, it seems to be more employers who are a little bit more nervous, both private sector and nonprofit.
you want to comment on that, Mary?
Well, last year also for Jobs for Youth, there was the COVID project, right? So there was additional funding there. This year, we're back at the original budget. When it comes to our budget, this is a separate vote. You know, we can move amongst programs, but most of the programs are, other than one this past year, were fully spent. So, whether or not.
Well, therein lies my
Larry and
concern, I
Vanessa.
guess, if you're back at the same budget, not any new COVID money. I'm getting a sense that employers are more nervous this year than they were last year, because there were other programs that were out there. And I just, all I'm saying is that I commend you, I support, but I just wonder whether that's enough, and I encourage some flexibility. And my other comment I want to make is I have the utmost respect for Elliot Dean, you're a person who deals with this. I can't say enough good about him and how he understands the challenges that employers have, as well as these projects, both whether it's the EDA, JCP projects. He really kind of gets it. So I want to just let you know, as an MLA, I'm quite impressed with his efforts and his work. He's great to get back to you, trying to find these files and stuff. He's just top notch. So
Yeah, thank you, him and Daryl are just, they definitely have their finger on the pulse, I guess, of what that, of how it works, and it's great. But I will say, honorable member, that, you know, like last year, we had to adapt and we had to change because of COVID. And we'll be monitoring that this year, and if we have to change because of requests coming in, well, then I'm prepared to do that and go back to Treasury.
Larry and Vanessa.
I think that's fine. I just that's the one for me, I think the special projects, EDA and JCP, seem to be suffice. I'm not getting a lot of pushback from them, but the student one I am. So I'm just trying to give you a heads up on that one, so to be prepared, and anything you can do to encourage that, I'll support you on that, certainly, and go from there. Yeah, thanks.
Appreciate that.
Leader of the do you have something to reply, or? No. Okay, Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Chair. Just following on from Larry and Vanessa there, if I remember right from news stories, the number of applicants for the Jobs for Youth program last year almost doubled, like went from 350 up to 700.
704, yeah.
Yeah, so more than double. And Mayor, you mentioned that the funding for that came through the COVID fund. We have a contingency fund sitting there, so maybe you don't know because the deadline is tomorrow, but does it look like we're on track to meet last year's number, or are we back to sort of more regular 350, 400?
Well, that's a good question, honorable member. You know, I can tell you right now, as of an update of actually March 29th, I had them do an update. Right now, there's 223 applications or positions in Rural Job Initiative, 383 in special projects, 292 in Jobs for Youth private. Jobs for Youth nonprofits 355, and Jobs for Youth public are 51, and job creation is 98. So that's where we stand right now. Okay. So, you know, we'll be watching numbers very closely. And you are right. You know, there is a contingency fund there for COVID, and you know, I'm very prepared to, if we see that need is there, then we will be going back.
Leader of the Opposition.
So just to press you a little bit on details of that, Minister. Last year you did expand the fund to meet the needs of the program, and I'm not sure if anybody was turned down. I couldn't speak to that. You would know. So will you be making a similar sort of? Will there be that latitude be there this year as well? Like you will take whoever comes forward with requests for funding?
No, we're going to have to look at that, honorable member. Like we'll see what the need is, and if there's a need there and industry needs it, then I'm prepared to look at it 100%.
Okay. Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Chair. So this change in the process of how people apply for Jobs for Youth came about as a review that was done 2 years ago. At the insistence, well, we were the third party back then, and there were a number of recommendations in that review. Can you tell us where you stand in terms of implementing those recommendations?
Well, we're actually still reviewing them and going over them and trying to work them into the program. So I want to look at the whole system, honorable member, like to see where we can streamline, make it better, make it easier for applicants to apply. I think, you know, the honorable member had a good point of when it comes to training and skill sets and being able to give somebody the betterment or ability to, you know, expand themselves or their education, or their skills. So we're working on it.
Leader of the Opposition.
And you know, it's a great program, a very worthy program, and we've had great success, both through our office, our legislative office, but also businesses in District 17, I would say without exception, have got back to me saying what a great program this is and make sure that it continues. One of the concerns that brought about that review that I asked for a couple of years ago was the inequity of the distribution of those places across the province, which was, you know, we talk a lot about equity of access to programs in this legislature. And I'm wondering whether you have, and I remember looking at the figures from last year, and it was better. It wasn't quite as skewed as it has been in previous years, but how easy is it for us to look, and the chair was just mentioning about that access to the information online. I'm on the page now, and there's nothing up there yet, but that's understandable. How easy is it for us to measure whether there is equity in access to this program across the province?
That's a good question, but it all depends too on industry, right? Because you have some districts that have less commercial or business style businesses than, like my district, it really hasn't got a lot of businesses, a lot more industrial than it is businesses, right? In your area, I would say would be a little bit lower probably than mine, where an area like Heath's or, you know, a member or somebody else's could be a little bit higher. So, you know, then we try to budget across the districts fairly based on what businesses are there, and that goes back to the staff that know them districts and the placements. So it can move, it can flow around as the need is in a different district.
Leader of the Opposition.
And of course, as you know, Minister, it's not just a private industry program. This is for communities, it's for nonprofits as well, and I understand the department pays a high percentage for those positions. So in my own riding, in my own district, probably a disproportionate number of these positions are actually community positions or nonprofit positions for the reasons you just mentioned. Is there, like, to keep track of those things as well? Because I know that does cost the department more.
Yeah, we do track that kind of stuff. I tell you, like prime example, like the special projects program, like that year, like last year, that was actually was down because number one, you know, the clients were not utilizing the programs; they were currently able to access CERB and EI payments, and also, you know, there wasn't as many nonprofit organizations open, so the need for them workers to be there was lower than a normal year, right? Prime example would be Crapo Exhibition, right?
Yeah.
Or something like that. You know, so.
Leader of the Opposition.
I'm good, thanks, Chair.
Cornwall Meadowbank.
Yeah, just I think you've mainly answered this, that if the situation arises over the next couple of weeks, but your deadline is the end of this week or tomorrow. Has there been any thought, like, to publicly say that we're going to extend this due to COVID, due to the fact that there is a lot of trickle-down effect on you know, students not accessing jobs at certain levels and then trickling down, and then your younger 16, 17, 18-year-old job for youth are kind of getting bumped. So I'm just wondering if there been any thoughts to possibly extend it and allow more people per business or per community? I'm just...
That's a good question, I'll remember. Like, next couple of days, we'll have a conversation with the deputy on staff on where we are in the deadline, and if we think that we should expand it or carry it out further, then we're prepared to do that. I guess the line would be we're open for business, so if we can help industry, we will.
Cornwall Meadowbank.
No, that's fine, Chair. Thank you.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of quick questions. Diversity is our strength, and this is a great program that goes across the island. And but oftentimes I find that people from the BIPOC community might not apply to this program as often as they should. Can you tell me, are you guys doing anything internally to encourage people from that community to get more involved in the application process?
Well, one thing I've been doing for the last 2 years constantly is every time I meet with a different organization or nonprofit group, or it could be a community, whatever, like I talk to them about what actually is available in rural development, and especially the Employment Development Agency, right? And a lot of them don't know it, you know, that they can apply. And, you know, I'm very open that, you know, you know me, I will go anywheres and meet with any group and try to explain a program or bring the staff into, you know, so that they get the information so that they can apply, and I encourage that. I think I think we're on that track, and I sort of hope that with our promotions that we've done over the last couple of years and going forward, that, you know, that will continue to let more people know about it. I'll remember.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Yeah, no, and I see it well with the training. Is there any training towards BIPOC issues or anything like that within the organization?
No.
No.
Not with us, no.
Charlottetown, West Royalty?
Yeah, because every department, and I guess I'll ask this to almost every department, what has been done or what has been planned for to improve that for Islanders after, what we've been through, the petition that was done. And I'd like to see, and maybe get you to report back on if there's anything tangible. Do you have any statistics about the percentage of BIPOC people who do apply for your programs?
Not that I have, no. But, I can say that if we come out of this budget and go back into rural development, there might be an opportunity there for us to do something under rural development with the group regarding around training and so on. So I'm willing to have that conversation.
Charlottetown, West Royalty?
And I'll bring that back to the group and maybe schedule a meeting with the right parties, and we'll see where it goes. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Total management, $196,900. Shall carry?
Carried.
Job creation and placement, community and business projects. Appropriations provided for wages of individuals hired by businesses and nonprofit organizations to work on approved projects, the majority of which are rural-based. Special projects program, $3,028,000. Job creation program, $650,000. Jobs for Youth program, $1,337,100. Rural Job Initiative, $724,000. Total community and business projects, $5,739,100. We did go there already with many questions on this section, but are there any others? Shall this section carry?
Carried.
Total job creation and placement, $5,739,100. Shall it carry?
Carried.
Total Employment Development Agency, $5,936,000. Shall it carry?
Carried.
Now we're moving on to economic growth and tourism. Okay. Your Tiffany. Very good. Okay. You'd have to clean the table, not first, right? Okay. While they are departing, we're going to do sanitizing, and then we're going to move on to economic growth, tourism, and culture, and we will begin on page 32.
I sent that through to Swartz. He's going to check in. Do you know how long he worked there?
Yep, he did at the Heath. Been made to bring a stranger onto the floor. Shall it be granted? Granted. So again, we are on page 32, and we're beginning the Department of Economic Growth, Tourism, and Culture. Stranger, would you like to introduce yourself for Hansford, given your name and position, please?
Sure. My name is Shannon Burke, and I am Director of Finance for the Department of Economic Growth, Tourism, and Culture.
Thank you very much, and welcome. General Administration, Corporation Management, appropriations provided for the operation of the ministers and deputy ministers' offices, trade negotiations and policy, records management, and staff development. Administration, $21,800. Equipment, $4,500. Material supplies and services, $13,100. Professional services, $180,000. Salaries, $940,400. Travel and training, $43,500. Total corporation management, $1,203,300. Someone had, okay, Charlottetown, Belvedere.
Sorry about that, Chair. I got ahead of you.
That's all right.
I just wanted to ask about the Partnership for Growth, which has a line item forecasted at $32,550 for 2021, and nothing right now, it looks like, in the 21-22 budget. Could we get some detail on that expenditure and what the plans are for that going forward, please?
I'll have to go back to get a little more info. I do know the plan is done. I'll see where the plan is and when it's going to be tabled or what the outcome is on that. I haven't had an update on that in probably about 60 days, so let me go back and I'll make sure I bring that back tomorrow.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. So I understand then the expenditure was for the development, the work involved in the development of the plan, and there's no further funding going to that organisation from your department, from the department, is that correct?
From my understanding, yes, at this point.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Okay. Obviously, we had, Chair, Partnership for Growth, there was a relationship established with a caucus member responsible for liaison and so on. Is that relationship now finished with that organisation?
Truthfully, Honourable Member, I don't know. It's been a while since I've had an update on this, so I'll have to go back and get an update.
Okay.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you. I appreciate that. A different question, Chair, is the Employment Standards Act review happening in this section, or is that happening somewhere else?
It's in Labor and Industrial Relations section.
Sorry.
It's in the Labor and Industrial Relations section.
Thank you.
Bottom of page 33.
Okay.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
I'm good, thank you.
Shall the section carry? Total general administration, $1,203,300. Shall carry? PEI Museum and Heritage Foundation. Appropriations provided for the study, collection, preservation, interpretation, and protection of the human and natural heritage of the province, operation of 6 historical heritage sites, and a national exhibition center, and production of the Island magazine. Material supplies and services, $3,800. Salaries, $1,234,600. Travel and training, $600. Grants, $313,900. Total museum and heritage foundation, $1,552,900. Cornwall Meadowbank.
Just wondering, roughly about 150,000 was an overspend, or what was that for, I guess?
So we fund the PEI Museum and Heritage Foundation. It's Crown Corporation, and we fund them on a break-even basis. So with a lot of the sites not being open last year, there was a difference in revenue. So we provided more on the break-even side.
Cornwall Meadowbank.
Salaries are a little more too. Could you kind of just give me an oversight on that?
Mm-hmm. For the new year budget?
Yeah, 22,000 or roughly.
Yep. So we're looking to hire an IT, social media communications officer. And right now we have a shared position of Orwell site manager and an education officer, and we'd like to move to a full-time education officer. So hiring a part-time site manager.
Cornwall Meadowbank.
That's fine, thank you, Chair.
Charlottetown Brighton.
Thank you, Chair. Has there been any development in the creation of the Provincial Museum?
There hasn't been as of late. I know there's still communication happening, but not like it was with COVID hit. Everything kind of got put at a stance. Obviously, there's still an appetite to do it, but it's with the last cost that came in was in the vicinity of $50 million. So we're trying to come up with another idea, but there is some communication happening, just not as much as there was before COVID. So we need to get back on track and get going with that again.
Charlottetown Brighton.
Thank you. The other question I had is maintenance and upgrading of buildings included in this budget?
That's in the capital budget.
Okay.
Charlottetown Brighton.
Thank you, Chair.
That's it. Any other questions? Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm just going to jump off what the Charlottetown Brighton was just saying there. Because I know maybe a year and a half ago, we were actively considering a provincial museum here, the only province that doesn't have one, and you mentioned that things have sort of been put in the back burner. I understand that. Are there any other barriers other than cost that you mentioned COVID as a temporary thing, but I mean government has continued. So are there any other barriers beyond the financial?
I've yet to see any. I'm not saying there's not, but to me, financial was the big one. There's an appetite, obviously, with government and the public, obviously, as well as museum and heritage, and the artifacts and so forth, like everybody wants the end goal. I have yet to see anything that gets in the way other than money right now. That's why I'm hoping we can come to, it may not be the Cadillac Museum everybody wants, but is there an alternative we can work towards that's better than having our artifacts in a building that's not being able to be seen? So I'm hoping we can find a ground that's going to work, but I know even the Premier, there's definitely an appetite to see this through at some point.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks. And, you know, it's pretty typical when you come up to a big anniversary of a profound event like the centennial, the Confederation Centre was built. You know, there was some very large projects done that are still here today that commemorate that. The sesquicentennial, I think that was a real missed opportunity for this province to build something memorable to remember 150 years since Confederation. In 2023, and that's a much more local thing, but it will be 150 years since PEI entered Confederation. And that strikes me as a real opportunity to do something specifically for this province in partnership with the federal government, and clearly with a price tag like that, it's going to have to be in collaboration with the federal government. We're not too late to get something like this done for 2023, which would again be the 150th anniversary of PEI entering Confederation. Have you had any conversations with the federal government at all about how we are going to, whether it's a provincial museum or something else, whether that we're going to have something built that will be a sort of something that will stand as a legacy for this big celebrations coming up?
I've had conversations with the federal government in the past on this with the MPs, and obviously everybody's got an appetite, but we haven't had a path forward. I guess we haven't gone as far as seeing what the feds will contribute financially. Where we originally went to was what do other jurisdictions offer as museums? What do we need to do? Because there's a lot more than I even understood, right, from the climate controlled and so forth. So that's where we had started. It's more than just having a physical building and the artifacts go into it. So we had started that process, and like I say, we've contacted the MPs. I think you're bang on. 2023 is not out of the loop. So if the feds, you know, we could certainly look at it, but I do think realistically $50 million is a lot of money right now. And it's not that there's not an appetite, it's there's so many infrastructure projects in the works right now, the mental health campus, the schools, so forth. So somehow I'd like to see this through, and I think this is where we need a lot of minds around the table to see what we can come up with, because if we do want to see it go through. It's just how I don't want to see 4 years go by and then miss opportunity as well, right? So I often look, could we start at a starting stage and build bigger when we start small and work our way up? So I am committed to going back to the group just to see, but that's, I was pretty deflated, I'll be honest, the last time. We were making such great headway, and then when that price tag come in, it just wasn't realistic at the time. So I'm committed to going back, and I'll touch base, and we'll set up a meeting to see where we stand with it.
Leader of the Opposition.
I just want to personally thank you for your sincere commitment to this, Minister, and I know because we've spoken about it both in the House and privately, and I know this is something that, like me, that you would really love to see here, and I know it's so easy to always push it away because we have schools and hospitals and that sort of what might be considered more necessary infrastructure that we have to take care of, but you know, we only get so many chances to build the momentum for something like this. So I'm really glad you've committed to meeting again, and you would have my 100% support to look in any funding pots you can put your fingers in to make this happen in 2023. I think it would be a wonderful legacy for both yourself as a minister and for the province as well.
Yeah, most certainly. I'll go back and I'll give you an update with the House how we proceed.
Thanks, Minister. I'm good, Chair.
Minister, I would like to advocate for you're talking about an appetite. I think West Prince is hungry for something like this. So please keep that in your thoughts, so it's not always centralized in Prince Edward Island, and we'd love to have a tourist anchor like that in the West to drive the tourists and some of the money up that way.
Well, I'll be honest, ever since Charlottetown Brighton asked me questions in the House that day, I think I've had every community in Prince Edward Island advocate for it. So.
I just want to make sure we're on the list.
All right, you're on the list, yeah.
Okay. Shall the section carry? Total PEI Museum and Heritage Foundation, $1,552,900. Shall it carry? Economic and Population Growth Administration. Appropriations provided for research, recruitment, settlement, and retention. Administration, $14,500. equipment, 4,500, material supplies and services, 110,000, professional services, 62,500, salaries, 933,000, travel and training, 31,500, grants, 1,121,500, total administration, 2,277,500. Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. The description of this section is appropriations provided for research, recruitment, settlement, and retention. Could you provide a general overview of what happens in those different areas, please?
So with our immigration stream, obviously we've seen immigration increase significantly here in Prince Edward Island over the years. But looking back, we've done a great job of bringing people in, but we haven't done a tremendous job of retaining them. Anywhere from our immigration to our student population and so forth. So our department is working with different nonprofits and so forth to see what some of the issues are that are driving people to leave. Like I say, governments have done a tremendous job in the past of bringing people here, but that seems about it. And I'll be honest, the best learning experience I had with this whole thing is I got to go on tour one summer with my department. It was the summer before last. And as we're meeting our different immigrants that have been here, and you listen to some of the challenges that they've been facing. So we went to one business. This gentleman was driving a bicycle to work for 3 months, a 45-minute drive each way, because nobody helped him get his driver's license. That's a problem. Why have we not helped this gentleman get his driver's license? We went to another business that they've gone 3 years on Prince Edward Island with health issues because they didn't have a clear path on the healthcare system. That's an issue. Why did we get to? So this is what we're trying to do. A better job is working not only to bring people here, but to keep them here, to make sure that they're being supported when they're here. We've seen some gaps in language barriers as well, working through that. So I'm quite confident in saying that the things we're doing now, you're going to see our retention rates change, but it's the little things I find that matters to these people, and we've been falling short in the past.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Obviously, we know that there's been a problem with retention, and you know, we know that that the growth in our population is critical for us to be able to sort of bring, you know, not just sort of increase the population, but increase the population with people who are going to be, you know, really valuable to our economy, to our society. And that means, you know, it's about skilled trades and families and all of those other pieces. But, you know, there are a lot of lessons to be learned from the last few years, and so we know that the population growth strategy is set to expire, and so I'm guessing you're working on a new one. If so, sort of what are some of the things you're thinking about that could look really different in that new population growth strategy?
Well, the big one I think is government, how we deal with this. So all along there hasn't been great communication between my department, education, health, different government departments working in silos. So that is one thing that we've been working hard towards. We've been meeting with those different departments now because I think we need a clear stream of, you know, what our numbers are immigration-wise, how many's coming in, project them. We need to make sure that they have health care, the school system, the transportation needed to want to keep them here and raise their family here. So I think that's one thing that we're focusing on that's probably been neglected in the past, and we're looking to improve on that.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. Certainly we hear from, you know, a very, I'll say, urban centre, so there's a large number of immigrants working in terms of businesses and homes in my area, as there are across the province. And the most consistent things that I hear are about the challenges for equity in the school system for their children in terms of sort of levelling up with language and then being able to get into that system. But probably the biggest challenge is housing. So what are you going to consider in terms of the demands for housing and the demands for primary care physicians as part of this strategy? You know, it's really been something that's been left out to
Yeah.
this point.
Certainly. So I think this is where my department probably hasn't dealt with in the past, but we've got a big part to do with housing as well. So we do a great job of driving people to Prince Edward Island, do a great job of helping drive the economy, but housing is part of the economy as well. So through my finance PEI department, we did come out with that residential loan there about a year ago, which we've had great uptake. But I think we need to expand on that, which we have a couple things in the works right now that we're dealing with other departments in government right now. I'm not far enough to commit to anything yet, but there's some good things happening in the works that will probably be housed out of my department on that to help with housing.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. And I know when we've spoken in the past, Minister, we've talked about that creative solutions aren't just sort of moving the deck chairs around. They're about really kind of looking at what is the barrier. I mean, certainly with housing, it's not just a financial barrier. It's literally, is there anything available? And we've heard stories of people who couldn't move here because they couldn't find something. Right. I've been working with at least 2 different families who are looking to move here from the States. And you know, we're asking on Facebook for referrals to find them a home that's appropriate. It's getting pretty desperate. One of the things, Minister, that has been brought to my attention is with the down payment assistance program, is further flexibility with that program to allow for what previously may not have been considered traditional loans. So, for example, for a mini home. Which we know there's a new development happening in north of Charlottetown that could be a real opportunity. But there's 2 big barriers. One of them is credit rating for new immigrants is actually often a real barrier, because no matter how much cash you may have, you can't enter into the housing space for a mortgage if you don't have an established credit rating, which is where the government can assist. And then the other one is obviously accessibility of housing that's appropriate. Are those, I know you can't give away all the farm there, but are those some of the things that you might consider?
Yeah, so a couple of initiatives we're working on would fill them voids now. So one thing we're doing right now, which I'm hoping to have something back, is that would help in the mini homes, the tiny homes as well as possibly people that can't afford homes to make it a little easier for them. Minister Myers has been a big advocate on this as well, and he's made a real good point that by owning your own home, it creates so much more of an opportunity as years go by, because you're paying into something, you have equity, it's yours, you can borrow towards it and so forth. Very valid point. We need to try and get as many people into ownership as we can. So I'm confident, I'm not saying we can fix all the problems, but I do think with a couple of these initiatives will certainly help out.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and you know, when we come to retention, one of the best ways you can retain somebody is to have them have roots that go to the point of sort of saying that they have literally a home. It's that, you know, a rental home can be a home, but you can still leave. It's a lot easier to go. We want to hold on to people here, and this is one of the ways we can do that. It's also one of the ways that we can address the challenge of retention of our own youth, whether they are newcomers who have grown up here or they're born and bred Islanders or Islanders by choice. We're losing our youth. We see that in our age demographics, and access to some of these things that we've talked about that are barriers are also part of that challenge. So this is something that's across the whole breadth. When we speak, I know I had also discussed this in the past with the minister, the now Minister for Environment and Energy, is that coordination between departments. So, for instance, there's an infrastructure component of putting together a space for mini homes or mobile homes. It's really positive to hear that you're talking about that cross work. But again, coming back to this needing to be driven by a strategy. So you have a strategy for population growth. What does that look like? Like, what are we targeting? Are we still on this very aggressive, keep going and going and going, or is there something that looks a little less bullish?
No, we're still going, because we've seen our labor shortage and the demand to keep going, but at the same time, we can't keep going at the pace we're going without putting a significant amount of investments back in, because we're starting to face the challenges we see it all now. But at the same time, I know the honourable member from Mermaid Stratford talks a lot about strategic plans. One thing my department is doing now is getting a strategic plan done, which I was hoping to have it back this week, but it looks like it's going to be sometime in April. That will take in a whole lot of aspects, this including one of them, through the department. So once I have that completed, I'll certainly table it, and you can see what we're working on the path forward with some timeframes in place.
Charlotte Belvedere.
Thank you. I'm sure the member from Mermaid Stratford is very pleased to hear that. I like plans too, but I think, Minister, there was a long radio interview this morning on CBC, The Current, talking about that have we hit a point where it is actually not financially possible for people to enter into the housing market anymore. And I don't want to believe that that's what's happening here, but there is more and more, it is more and more financially difficult for people to grow a family, to have children even. Is that an aspect of population growth, is recognizing that our birth rate is actually dropping?
Well, certainly. We see what's going on in the whole country right now. What's happening in PEI is happening through every province, which is scary. And I know I hear it a lot from especially parents of young people to say, you know, the way things are going, our children will never be able to afford a home, or I get calls from parents that say my son has a good job, but they're still living at home at the age of 30. So we need to find ways to be creative around that. Traditionally, the banks have been pretty strict on who they lend to and how they do it, and I think with COVID, they've really tightened the reins up. But I do feel there's a path forward. I do think the market needs a correction. I'll be honest, we can't keep going down this path. Some people might not like hearing that, but it's got to the point now where I was talking to a contractor yesterday and they can't get drywall anywhere. So there's a back order drywall, and they're actually wanting to pay more than what they originally would just to get it. It's getting to be a bidding war. That's not good for anybody, and it's not good for the economy. So there is going to be a correction at some point, because it can't keep going the pace it is. Let's hope it doesn't happen overnight. We slowly work through it, but I even know some of the struggles we're looking at now is to find people, even if we wanted to build, finding carpenters that aren't booked 2 years out even to build anything. The amount of construction happening in this province is unreal, and every time I drive anywhere, I look and I said, that building wasn't there yesterday. I can't believe the amount of infrastructure being built. So it's a good problem, it's a bad problem too. I think we got to find a happy medium there somewhere.
Charlotte Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is the hard part about this is that, you know, we're seeing this huge spend and this huge build. You're right, like it's mind-blowing how fast things are going, but I'm old enough to have lived through a number of bubbles, you know, whether it was the dot-com bubble or the 2008 market crash. I lived in the UK during the market bubble there, where we went from, it was 18% interest rates on mortgages, but the housing market was so hot that people would, there'd be a lineup for people to view houses, and then they would run to the agent to make an offer, and it was quite common for houses to go 20% above asking price. It was shocking, and then when it crashed, people were left with negative equity, and that's what I see as well. That is a terrible situation to be in. But it's not just you know, housing is obviously kind of the symptom of this. The core of this is that we have had healthy population growth here. But as you mentioned right back at the beginning, we've had a challenge keeping people. One group of people that we are having challenge keeping, I mentioned, is youth. And that's sort of more, I think, in the settlement area than the retention area. How do we help people settle? And so there's two parts to that, I guess. One of them is how do we bring down some of those barriers for youth out migrating, like going away and not coming back? And the other part is, what additional work is your department doing to work to retain international students who have chosen to come here and really want to stay?
Yeah, certainly. So one thing, I guess, pre-COVID, COVID has kind of changed a lot of things, including one is taking some of our youth back. So I find people are looking at a different lens now that COVID has happened. I often use my sister as an example. I'd love to have her home. She's 30 years old. She's in Alberta. She works at the hospital out there. She would love to come home, but the opportunity for her job just isn't here. Now could easily train into a different skill set and get into a position that would be there. But I think we constantly got to change our programs around. I've seen a lot of barriers in the past through my department on upskilling and the skill sets. We're missing out on a huge opportunity on the trade side that we're working towards there now. But really, hindsight's a great thing. This should have been started 10 years ago, and now we're going to be playing catch up on that. So I think we constantly got to listen to our youth and see what changes are taking place in the transition and try and work through them, because they're discouraged. Some of them are discouraged. Some of them don't want to leave, but they don't have a choice. And on the other hand now, our population, we're driving people back that never planned on coming home before. They look at PEI as a safe destination right now. They look at PEI as a retirement spot. They're just changing. COVID has changed the way they look at it and want to move back home. So I think we're going to have a big influx of people moving back. So not only our immigration, but we're going to have some of our islanders that had left come back. That's really going to push us hard. So we got to make sure that we continue to roll out initiatives and supports to work through that.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. You know, one of the things we've heard from international students and from employers is that international students are often not eligible for job programs, and we've talked about this before in Keith. There's been some unfortunate barriers because of the requirements around the labour market development agreements, but what's the progress on that in terms of sort of bringing some of those barriers down?
Yeah, certainly. So I met with the student union. The first I had heard about that was probably approximately last November. So I went back to the department to see where the barrier was. It comes because of the federal agreement we have with the feds. That was the issue. So we're allocating some more provincial money to help support that in this budget. So,
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just ask sort of one more question and then go for somebody else, and then I'll come back if that's okay.
Sure.
It's just there has often been, especially with newcomers moving to PEI, there's often been a concentration of newcomers to urban areas. I know there have been some incentive programs to try and really help newcomers settle in areas other than Charlottetown and Summerside. We've definitely heard that some of the barriers are things, again, housing, but transportation, as you mentioned, the lack of transit, that kind of thing. How is that going to be addressed to incentivize population growth? Because we're seeing those communities reduce, so we want to sort of really help to encourage settlement in rural areas.
I don't have the numbers with me, but I was surprised to see the rural areas have had the largest uptake of immigration. So we have residents moving into the rural areas more than they ever have before, which I'll go back and get the exact number, but it's a significant amount. I think a lot of it has to do with a lot of the rural business now, hiring immigration through immigration. Housing prices are obviously a little lower in rural areas, which driving people out. And I do find the communities have really supported immigration. We'll use Tignish, for example, the Honourable Member for Tignish Palmer Road. What they've done up there in the Filipino community, it's tremendous to see. They fit right into the community. It's a whole family up there, and you look what they've done, just helping a business out that struggled with labor before, and now is very successful. So I think all of them things happening are helping us out in the rural areas. So there's a lot of good initiatives there. But I want to get some numbers to take back, because I think everybody would be pleasantly surprised how much our immigration is working in the rural areas.
Okay, member, do you want me to put back on the list?
That'd be great.
Sure.
Thank you, Minister.
You're welcome. Cornwall Meadowbank.
Just a few questions. What is the actual retention rate as of today?
I'll have to get back to you on that one, Honourable Member. I don't have it right in front of me, but I'll make sure I bring it back tomorrow.
Cornwall Meadowbank.
Where are the most immigrants coming from now?
It's another good question. They vary. Obviously, we still have our Chinese immigrants coming in, Vietnamese, Filipino. I don't know which one is our strongest, but I'll go back and bring it back tomorrow as well.
Cornwall Meadowbank.
Just curious on, I know the Honourable Member, my colleague, asked about the Atlantic Growth Strategy, and I couldn't hear what she was actually asking, but I was just wondering Has there been any discussions for a new Atlantic growth strategy, or are they contemplating?
I haven't had any update on that, but my department might have. I don't mind going back and asking that as well.
Cornwall Meadowbank?
In your temporary foreign worker program, has the federal government done anything more to possibly allow those temporary foreign workers to apply for permanent residency?
That's one thing that I'll be honest, we've really struggled over this last year and a half on the temporary foreign workers. It's the unknown. It's a federal program, and unfortunately the province doesn't get a lot of info. If it wasn't for the employers feeding us a little bit of information, we would be left in the dark on this one. I've had numerous conversations with the minister on this as well, just to express, because there's a lot of concern out there right now on the fish plants, on our farms, and the path forward on the temporary foreign workers. So I'm confident the federal government are working through it. I know there's conversations, but we don't have any final details yet. But we usually get them, just never as quick as I'd like to get them.
Cornwall Meadowbank?
And just relevant to, we talked about labor shortage, or you mentioned labor shortage, and on the skilled worker, has there been any discussions to define what actually a skilled worker is, to open that up a little more?
There has been discussions. I don't have a lot of details on that, but I know it's a huge issue because we've seen a lot of skilled workers that they might have a skill set or a license from the country of origin, but when they get to Canada and the PEI, it seems to be a different circumstance. So I know there is discussions with my department and the federal government on that, but I haven't had an update on that lately. But I'd certainly go back and get one.
Cornwall Meadowbank?
Do you know how many skilled workers are in that pool right now to draw from?
No, I don't, but I can get that exact number.
That's fine, Chair,
Cornwall.
thanks.
Okay, you're welcome. Charlottetown West Royalty?
Thank you, Chair. A large portion of the immigration, I think, is the Indian population from India. So they're coming to Prince Edward Island, basically it's like from Ontario, because in Prince Edward Island, the rules are a little bit easier to get their Canadian affairs in order. But, you know, chatting with a lot of them in the district, their plans initially are to return to Ontario, Brampton, or in those type of areas. What are some of the things that the department's doing to make sure that they look at Prince Edward Island, to make Prince Edward Island home after the 2-year period?
It's disappointing to hear that if that's what they're saying they're doing, because that's what we're trying to avoid. A lot of the employers are sponsoring immigrants to come in to fill positions and make them part of the community. So I know the department, we have a lot of requests to come to Prince Edward Island, and we go through them relatively well as with the federal government. So I hope that's not happening. I know it does happen some, but if that's the going trend out there, we need to go back and look at that, because that's not the way this program's designed.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
Yeah, no, I know it's not supposed to be designed, and then it's just that the fact that they're younger, they're making it, trying to work, and I know they're trying to bring in, you know, to form a sense of community, and they're doing that. But anything that you could look into around that would be good. So for the department, what are some of the overarching goals? Like, I mean, immigration is fluid. We need it. You know, I was at the Chamber of Commerce event, and an award winner, Peter Lawler, was up there, and he said, "Thank you for the immigration program." And that was very interesting for him to hear that. They wouldn't be able to survive as a business. So.
So goals for the department as a whole? Is that, there's a bunch of like kind of high level. So obviously immigration's one. We want to contribute to the housing shortage that we're seeing. We want to be a part of fixing that problem. Internet's obviously a big priority in our department as well, which we've made significant inroads on that. We're doing some revamping through our skills PEI department and upskilling and making pathway forward a little easier for people there. We've completely done an overhaul of all our innovation programs to simplify, to broaden them, to provide more small businesses opportunity that probably didn't have the opportunity in the past, as well as finance PEI. We're developing some different loan programs. One that obviously you and I talked about before, some incentives for the BIPOC community, and different organizations. So there's a whole bunch of things that we're working on, and I think once I table this strategic plan and everybody can see it, they'll have a little bit more knowledge and of some timeframes and what we're trying to accomplish in the time we're here.
Charlottetown West Royalty?
Does your department ever look at immigration? I know this has been a topic of the past, recruiting into the health field, or talking about that type of thing. Where and how do we promote that aspect of things?
Yeah, certainly. So I know we've been working through my Skills PEI shop on that as well as Minister Hudson's department, Department of Health, for exactly that. So what we're trying to do is find I guess, labor shortages in certain key sectors and what we can do to help offset in the short term that will help support them. So there's some initiatives working now. I can kind of go back and get an update what sectors we are contributing to and bring that back to you.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
That'd be great, because I know there's a lot of rules around it, and a lot of organizations, or not organizations, but that societies are overarching rules around that. But I mean, we have to look at what the best practices are in the nation and set that as our goal, I do believe.
Yeah, definitely.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
That's good for me for now, Chair.
Mermaid Stratford.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, and I might be in the wrong place. It might have already passed, but I just was wondering if I could touch quickly on the department's performance for the compliance to Archives and Records Act.
Yep.
And you're currently at 59.1% compliant.
Yep.
What is your plan to get up to? That's one of the lowest.
It is lowest.
Numbers.
Yeah, it is lowest. And I'll be honest, when I seen that number, there's not a person that was more concerned or angry. It was a day of mixed emotions for me, because I tend to operate, if I can fix it, I certainly will. So the day after I found out about it, I met with the public archivist to find out where our issues were at. So a lot of our issues since the following March we have worked towards, but there was a few things that have popped up that's going to bring that score up. So I'm quite confident as of the end of this March, you're going to see that score up significantly. One was the RIM training through my department. That was a big one, so that's a mandatory course that everybody has to take on retention. And my department, there was approximately, I think at the time, 82%. So we were still missing a percentage of people that didn't do that. So we pushed that through to make sure they got done. One thing that was kind of a check mark on us that just at the time I wouldn't have thought of, but we have employees that work driving a lawnmower and a golf course, or some maintenance, they wouldn't have taken that course because they have no access to a computer, so forth. So that's one gap that we're working with there now to see who needs to do it. How we keep our records was another. So that's another big part that we've worked towards, and we've made significant inroads on that as well. Thirdly was the staff. We've seen there was a staff shortage to help get to where we need to be. So recommendation from the public archivist was to hire 2 more to help with records retention, and that's what we've done. I don't know if they've been hired yet, but they have gone. Yeah, and interviews are starting next month, so once them 2 positions are filled. So anyway, they seem to be quite happy with what the department's done since that has come out, and we're working to get that number up.
Mermaid Stratford.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Minister, for that answer, because the Special Committee on Government Record Retention, as you recall, did a significant amount of work, and it directly impacted your department, right? So.
Yep.
There was a number of other recommendations that committee had made around duty to document and that kind of thing. Have you looked at that through your department as to how you can implement those types of things?
Yes, and truthfully, a lot of them have been implemented now since then. And then there's goals of timeframes for the rest of them, how long it will take, which I don't have that in front of me. But yeah, that's something that between my deputy and myself, we've been working with staff on to make sure that it gets rectified. And I'm quite confident now with the changes we're making that there'll be significant improvements.
Mermaid Stratford.
That's great. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Minister, for the answers.
Okay, Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Chair. Coming back to the sectors, because this is about part of the economic and population growth is about the support that's provided to the sectors. Is that correct? It's in this section?
Yep.
So I'd asked before about what we're doing to help support the tech sector in PEI. There's a gap there at the moment and has been for a while in terms of there being a sector council. Has that something that's come up in consultation with community?
I haven't heard anything, but give me a little more what you're hearing so I can go back and see if it can be rectified.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
I should have my headphone, I missed that.
Oh, just give me a high level of what
Sure.
you're hearing so I can go back and check into it.
Sure. So we know that there's really good support in Innovation PEI, and we can talk about that later in terms of there being an IT specialist
Yep.
and so on. But and that there is obviously some there's activity in the tech sector, especially the IT tech sector here, because we have some good companies that are taking advantage of our tax credits and
Yep.
so on. But there is no focus or voice for the tech sector to move and grow without there being a sector council that represents it. There are a number of industries and organizations that are working really actively and are really successful, but for instance, who do they speak to as a group when they want to talk about that we need more qualified trainees coming out of Holland College?
Right.
We need to expand that program. Sector councils are not revenue generating. They need support, but
Yep.
they also provide you with a way to have a voice from the community that you can connect to kind of get a picture of what's the community, what's that group of companies talking about.
Yep.
So that's the kind of context. And with ITAP folding a few years ago, we've had a gap there.
Okay, good point. I have, nobody reached out to me on that, but I'm not saying they haven't on the department side of it. Let me go back to both innovation and skills for an update, and I'll touch base with you and see where we're at, if anywhere on that, and see what we can do to improve that.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you, Minister. I appreciate that. The province has entered into some trade agreements recently. We have, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, CETA, the new, I can't remember the acronym, Free Trade Agreement. Have any of these had any direct impact on PEI, and are there any other agreements coming forward that we should be aware of?
I think they probably all have somewhat of an impact on PEI as well as every other province, but there's none that I'm aware of that are anything to alarm. I know you see it from my meetings, we've had calls with other ministers. A lot of the western provinces seem to be more involved with this, but there's nothing that I'm aware of that is really looking to impact PEI, but let me go back and check just to clarify.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Thank you. We have talked before about the push for harmonization in business regulations across the region, particularly the opportunity, for instance, across the maritime provinces. A couple of examples of that are the federal regulation requirements for food manufacturing and the barriers that happen for food manufacturers to scale because of those federal requirements. Has there been any movement at all on supports to help companies that are growing and scaling in that space?
Yeah.
Or is this a question better for Innovation PEI?
Yeah, innovation, but there definitely is.
Okay.
We can go back to that when I get to that budget book, but
I
yeah.
drifted across the category. Thank you, Chair.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
I guess one other piece around economic and population growth is that one of the significant barriers for economic prosperity for individuals is wage growth. And I know that we will talk in the next section on labour in terms of the Employment Standards Act, but on a general basis, what from a province's perspective, what can be done to promote and support wage growth in PEI to ensure that we remain competitive for individuals as well as for the economy?
So obviously that's been a topic of discussion in this House for a while now. I think, like we said, we can all say that minimum wage is not enough to survive, but at the same time, and we're not convinced the answer is to try and do it on the backs of business, but we do have to find a path forward, because anybody that's trying to survive on minimum wage right now, if it can be done, it can't be done, but anybody that's doing it, I always admire, because I don't know how they're doing it. one thing with PEI, and I know it's not enough, but we are leading the Atlantic region in minimum wage. I think what we need to do is figure out what the cost of living is, and every community is different. So what the cost of living in Charlottetown is obviously significantly higher than probably the cost of living in Tignish or Kensington or so forth. I know we've talked about this in the past. I certainly think we need to find a path forward. I don't have the answer to it, but I'm hoping down the road we can figure something out to offset that more. What the work that's been done on the committee on the basic income, I think this fits into it real well. I don't have the answer to it. I know that $13 an hour is not enough to survive on, but I do also know that the business community is struggling in a big way to survive right now. I wish I had the answer, and I don't.
Charlottetown Belvedere.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not one that if there was a quick answer, we would have fixed it, right? I think though, it is challenging when we talk about recruitment, settlement, retention, and part of that is about retaining and supporting youth, for example, who are entering into the workforce, or just our general population who are really want to live and work here. And it's not that, again, it's different here fundamentally than it is anywhere else. Most other places are having the same challenges. But there's a point where, admiration and $10 will get you a cup of coffee. We need to be actively working towards those as actively as we do to support businesses. And so sort of from an economic perspective, having workers who can afford to participate in the economy is as important as places for them to participate. So I'll look forward to us talking a bit more about employment standards, in the next section. I think I'm good there, Chair.
Okay. Shall the section carry? Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. In the speech from the throne, we talked about establishing 3 tax-free zones for encouraging clean energy and clean tech. Is there any movement on where those will be, or how will those be established?
I don't have any of that information, Honourable Member, no.
Summerside South Drive.
Would it be this department that's determining where those tax-free zones end up?
No.
Summerside South Drive.
Who would be determining that?
It's a good, environment's budget.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. There's also the mention of using the tax system to create an investment tax credit for clean tech businesses. Is that in addition to for instance, if there was a community economic development business that was registered, there's a 35% provincial tax credit. Is it something comparable to that, or would it be in addition to that if it was?
That's going to be in my innovation PEI budget.
Another section?
Yeah, different section. Okay. I can give you the high level when we get to that point. I just don't have it in front of me.
Summerside South Drive.
Thank you, Chair. And the Eco Innovation Park, is that part of this department as well?
No, that would be
also environment?
I believe environment.
I'm just going to, Honourable Member, remind you we're on economic and population growth and the administration part of it.
Yes, I just thought this might have to do with economic growth.
No. He just mentioned where it was from. So we're on the section right now of administration. Appropriations provided for the research, recruitment, settlement, and retention. So do you have any questions on this section?
Yes, well, I thought my
questions you have the floor.
I thought my questions might be related to that, Chair, so I'm not sure.
No, he answered it 3 times and he said you're not even in the same department. So do you have any questions regarding this section?
Chair, I did not ask the same question 3 times.
You asked 3 questions. All 3 questions were for a different department or a different section. We are right now on appropriations provided for research, recruitment, settlement, and retention for economic and population growth. Do you have a question on this section?
I suppose not. I guess my question is, where do my questions lie?
Charlottetown West Royalty, you have the floor.
I just wanted to ask a question on the Express Entry program. Any changes to that program, or?
No changes that I'm aware of, no.
So that would be when were the changes made last? It was.
I'd have to go back, Honourable Member.
Okay, how many?
Charlottetown West Royalty.
Sorry, Chair. How many intermediaries, metearies are there?
11, 12.
Charlottetown West Royalty.
What will be? I mean, that program is important. What do you foresee happening in the future with that program, or is it status quo, or?
That's all through IIDI, which wouldn't be in here, but as of right now, things are, status quo.
Okay.
Charlottetown West-Royalton?
Thank you very much, Chair.
Charlotte Section Carry? Total economic and population growth, 2,277,500. Shall carry? Labor and Industrial Relations. Appropriations provided for the Industrial Relations Services to employers, unions, and individuals, the Labor Relations Board, the Workers' Advisory Program, the Employment Standards Board, the Employer Advisor, and the Workers' Compensation Appeals Tribunal. Administration, $47,600. Equipment, $2,000. Material supplies and services, $25,900. Professional services, $232,000. Salaries, $863,200. Travel and training, $31,600. Grants, $2,500. Total labor and industrial relations, $1,204,800. Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Chair. Is this where the Employment Standards Act review would be? Is this under this section?
Yes, yep.
Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Chair. Can you tell me how that review is progressing?
I had an update a week or two ago, so it's still progressing, but with COVID, we couldn't get as much of the public consultations as we would like. I don't have a time frame, but I do know it's in the works. I believe early spring we'll be going into consultations.
Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just curious if up till this point, if government has identified any key issues or themes that you want to be addressing here?
There's none that I would have with me. I'm not saying they haven't. I don't mind going back and checking into that.
Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Chair. I'm curious, I've heard from a lot of people who have been concerned about not being able to access paid sick leave, as I'm sure you can understand, particularly during COVID. And I'm just curious if you've had any conversation with the Federation of Labor on improving working conditions for Islanders?
Yeah, certainly. So the Federation of Labor, we meet every 90 days, a great organization, a lot of good discussion. They've come up with a lot of good ideas. We've been able to implement quite a few from the Federation. So that is a topic that has been brought up. Is something that obviously would need to be talked about at some point. We just felt with COVID and everything going on, it wasn't the time for it. But at the same time, I don't think we'll just turn a blind eye to it. I think once we get back into a little bit of a normal, that we can get out and do some consultations, we will certainly do that.
Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose I would respectfully disagree with you, Minister. I think during COVID has particularly shined a light on the need for paid sick leave, because there's so many people who are finding themselves in these situations and unable to stay home. It creates some vulnerable situations for people.
Yeah, I certainly don't agree with you on saying that I don't agree with it, but at the same time, that's why we went out with our $1 million fund to help people out during COVID. That was an initiative we took, as well as the supports from the federal government. So from my understanding, there's nobody that does not have access to that. If they don't, please tell me and I'll do my best to fix that. But that was to fill that void during COVID until we can do some proper consultations and get the feedback from Islanders.
Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Chair, and fair enough. I take your point on that, Minister. I'm curious how many cases the Employment Standards Board would hear in any given year.
Good question. Something I don't have right in front of me, but I'll bring that back.
Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Chair. Do you think that Islanders have a good understanding of their ability to appeal matters to the employment standards?
That's a good question. I haven't had anybody tell me they don't, but I wouldn't know, to be truthful. I know the department does do a good job. Patricia McPhail is very good at her job in communication with industry and the public. She does a great job. I don't have the details. I can certainly go back to see what calls they would get. Myself personally, I haven't had any complaints the way it's done, but that's only me. I can't speak for everybody in the House.
Summerside, Wilmot.
Thank you, Chair. And it's a tricky thing. It's a catch-22 because people don't know what they don't know, right, Minister?
Yeah.
So if I'm uninformed on my rights and my ability to appeal, I certainly couldn't call to tell you that. So I guess I was wondering what sorts of communication or education, community outreach.
Well, it's a good point. If we feel there's a gap and people aren't don't know the path forward, we need to change that. So I'm certainly open to suggestions that you might think would improve that, because I don't want people to not know. So obviously I'm open. I certainly would be open for discussion to how we can improve it.
Summerside Wilmot?
Thank you, Chair. And fair enough on that. I'm wondering if you have a sense of what we're doing for education on this currently?
Not in front of me, I don't.
Summerside Wilmot?
Thank you, Chair. Would you be able to bring back a little information
Yep,
on that?
most certainly.
Summerside Wilmot?
Thank you, Chair. On a slightly different but related topic, Minister, how do you feel, are you of the impression that working conditions for Islanders are improving?
I certainly think so. We try and take every complaint that we would get, which obviously I wouldn't get them personally, but we would get updates, and which would, a lot of it would fall OH&S and inspections and so forth when a complaint would come in, which I would usually be notified if there's anything drastic that would come up. There's always complaints that come in and we're followed up, but I can go back and get a number to see how many we deal with in a run of a year, and but I certainly think the meetings with OH&S, from what I can see, is they do a tremendous job. Once a complaint comes in, they're on the ball, they get out and they try and work and fix the issues that were dealt with.
Summerside Wilmot?
Thank you, Chair. That's really interesting. I wonder if you could give me a sense, and you might not have this information in front of you, but whether or not those trends of complaints coming in are increasing or decreasing or staying about static.
Yeah, certainly. I don't have that, but I'll go back and see. I'm curious myself, so I don't mind doing it.
Summerside Wilmot?
Thank you, Chair. And one other thing you said just made me think of something else. I apologize for that, Minister. Can you help us understand what government's relationship is with the Employment Standards Board?
With the Employment Standards Board?
Yeah.
It's a board. There's no relation at all. They wouldn't deal with me as a minister at all. The recommendation would come from the board, and then I would take it to cabinet.
Summerside Wilmot?
Thank you, Chair. But you would receive a report from them maybe yearly or?
I probably would get a report. I'd have to check that. I don't remember seeing one lately if we did, but there'd be no correspondence with me and the board at all.
Summerside Wilmot?
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if you get reports back or information, or if I respect that it's totally independent of you. That wasn't what I was trying to imply, and I apologize
for sure.
if that's how it came across. Just wondering if you get communications from them or outcomes broadly.
Certainly. No, I'll go back and check. I don't recall getting anything, but I don't mind going back and check. I might get a report that I'm not aware of, but it's been a while if it is.
Summerside Wilmot?
Thank you, Chair. I'm correct that WCB would fall under this section?
Yes. Yep.
Summerside Wilmot?
Thank you, Chair. As you know, Minister, I've certainly had a number of constituents come to me with WCB-related questions or concerns. I suppose I'm curious when the last time we reviewed this legislation was.
It's a good question. So the budget, there'd be no budget for WCB in here because they would be independent from us. I can answer as best of my ability because WCB, I'm the minister responsible for it, but they would have a board in place, and I don't know when the last time legislation would have been looked at. I'd have to go back and check.
Summerside Wilmot?
Thank you, Chair. That's an interesting distinction. I appreciate you making it, Minister. Back to my thought on that one. Do you have any appetite to look at reviewing WCB legislation to make sure it's in line with what best practices would be saying or with the current circumstances that we find ourselves in?
Yeah, I think I'd like to see what the rest of other provinces and jurisdictions do and how often they do it to see if we're in line. I'm not familiar how often they would be reviewed, but I've got no problem going back and seeing what other provinces and territories do, and I don't mind giving you an update to see what I find out. I can put somebody on the department on that to see what we can figure out.
Summerside Wilmot?
That's perfect. Thank you, Chair.
Leader of the third party?
Thank you, Chair. My question was just asked, but I do have another question. Like, why is your department responsible for Workers' Compensation Appeals Tribunal if they're a separate identity? Why aren't they paying for that in their own department?
Good question.
That's where somebody would go if they received a decision from Workers' Comp that they wanted to appeal. So they would get assistance through the appeals tribunal to challenge that.
Leader of the third party?
So, but to my question is, why is it being paid for out of this department? Why isn't it paid at the Workers' Comp if your folks are supposed to be at arm's length from Workers' Comp and it's it's like IRAC to the Minister of Education, is that correct? Is it similar?
Yeah, I don't have the answer to that, honourable member. I can try and find out why it would be in here and not through.
Yeah, we kind of are arm's length from workers' comp.
Yeah, the best way we can explain, we're arm's length, so, but I see what you're saying. You're wondering why it's paid out of this department and not workers' comp's budget, and I don't have the answer, but.
Leader of the third party.
I'm sorry?
I said that they would be appealing decisions from workers' comp, but that's some of the sections in here are actually funded by workers' compensation. That would be one, that is, we receive dollars from them to pay for that.
What kind of things would that be funded through workers' comp?
There's 6 sections that are covered under here, so worker advisor, the employer advisor, and workers' compensation appeals tribunal are all funded by dollars that come in through workers' comp.
Leader of the third party.
Is there a contact person at workers' comp? I know with confidentiality issues and, we as MLAs can't get into somebody's file, but if someone was to call us with a concern, is there someone we can talk to at workers' comp on their behalf to follow up on their concern?
I don't necessarily, I know one of the issues we've seen in the past is MLAs calling workers' compensation or.
Sorry, I missed you, that the door opened.
I said, I know what we've seen in the past is MLAs calling workers' compensation or MLAs calling the minister to get info, and it's strictly confidential with what takes place. I don't disagree with you. There should be a contact. I'm not necessarily saying it needs to be in workers' compensation, but there should be a contact point that somebody could call if they're having issues. And there might be one in place that I'm just not aware of, so I'll have to go back just to verify. But I know I get it quite often from MLAs calling as I'm the minister responsible for it, but at the same time, I got to walk a line. I can't cross that line to interfere in somebody's confidentiality. So let me go back and see, but you're making a good point. I agree there should be a contact with some concerns. Obviously, they're through workers' compensation, everybody that's dealing would have an officer, and sometimes maybe they're not comfortable dealing with their officer, so there should possibly be another contact person. So let me go back and check on that one.
Okay.
Leader of third party.
Okay, and getting back, so the Workers' Compensation Appeals Tribunal, that's for the worker, correct? If they're not happy with their decision.
Right.
What happens when it's reversed and it's an employer? Is there any protection for the employer when there's a decision made that they may have questions about? And is there a contact person that those employers could contact?
So this would be for both the worker and the employer. But going back to the contact, I'm not sure if there would be, if they're not comfortable dealing with their officer, they're dealing with through workers' compensation. I don't know what the next avenue would be. And there could be one in place that I'm just not aware of. So I'll go back and find out. And you make a valid point. If there's not one, there should be one.
Leader of the third party.
Well, just sitting here thinking, okay, if there's a caseworker for the individual,
yeah,
would it be proper for that caseworker to be dealing with the employer? Should the employer be dealing with somebody else? And to my question, who would that somebody else be, or who would it be?
Yeah.
Leader, sorry.
No, certainly valid point, and there could be a way to do that I'm just not aware of. Like I say, I'm not hands-on with workers' compensation. I'm the minister responsible for it, but the everyday operations I would not be privy to. But I'll go back and get as much info from workers' compensation as I can get in the path forward. And I think it would be good all MLAs to have it, because I know I get a lot of calls from MLAs that are looking to navigate the system as well, and it's tough when you don't have the answer. So I'll see what we can do on this one.
Third party.
Just one further question. We know things come forward all the time with changes to the Workers' Compensation Act, like a one-off or things like that. So the honourable member asked you, when was it reviewed or brought up to 2021 standards?
Yep.
So do you know any idea when the last time there was a review done on workers' comp?
No, and it's a question I've never asked before, but I'm curious to go back to see when it was and what other provinces do, how often they do it, to see what other jurisdictions do, and if it looks like that we're not following what other provinces are doing, I'll certainly recommend to see what we can do on that one.
Leader of third party.
That's it.
Fine.
Thank you very much, Minister.
Cornwall Meadowbank.
Just back to your workforce development, how many positions, there's an increase of about 190, 200,000. 200,000. What are those positions, or how many of those positions, and what are they? And your salaries?
In labor and industrial relations?
Skills PEI?
We're not there
No,
yet.
we're not there yet.
Oh,
We're not in that
sorry,
section yet,
sorry. My mistake. Now you know the question.
Be ready for it.
Mermaid Stratford?
Thank you, Chair. Minister, I would just like to take a second to talk about on-call work. So if people are being asked to work on-call shifts, and what's your knowledge around like the amount of on-call shifts that people can be required? Is there protections for them if they decline the shift? Is there, I mean, if people are constantly on call, that's like an overnight, it's constantly on their mind. Have you had many conversations around that work structure?
No, I have had many conversations on it. I'll certainly go back to the department and ask that question. I'm thinking there's legislation in place. I don't have the answer to that. I don't want to speak and give you the wrong answer. So let me go back and check with my department. I'll bring something back tomorrow on that.
Okay.
Mermaid Stratford?
Thank you. Yeah. So just, and not necessarily a question, just a comment, like, so I've heard concerns, it's hard for people to come forward to, right? Because if there's not a confidentiality place or a place for them to lodge a complaint where they are going to be safe, it's hard for them to even bring it forward, right? Because then that puts them in a difficult situation with their employer, and if they're not given confidentiality in order to complain about it, what's the process there? So I'm just wondering if we can have a look at what type of process we can put in place to protect employees that might be working in that kind of environment but may not have the best working conditions in that
I agree 100%, because I do feel that if people aren't safe and trusting that their confidentiality won't be broken, they're not going to speak. So I'll go back to see how it's done now and what could be done.
Mermaid Stratford, do you have any more questions on this section?
I don't, I'm good.
Okay. Shall the section carry? Total labor and industrial relations, 1,204,800. Shall it carry?
Carry.
Honorable members, we're now going to move over to official opposition time. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I move that the Speaker take the chair and that the chair report progress and beg leave to sit again.
Shall it carry?
Thanks, Jan.
Mr. Speaker, as Chair of the Committee of the Whole House, I have been on to consider the grant of supply to Her Majesty. I beg leave to report that the committee has made some progress and begs leave to sit again. I move the report of the committee be adopted.
Shall it carry? The honourable member from Mermaid Stratford and the opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the member from Tyne Valley Sherbrooke, that Order 24 be now read.
Shall it carry?
Order 24, an act to amend the Health Services Act, Bill number 106, ordered for second reading.
The honourable member from Mermaid Stratford and the opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by Tyne Valley Sherbrooke, that the said bill be now read a second time.
Shall that carry?
Carried.
Bill number 106, an act to amend the Health Services Act, read a second time.
The honourable member from Mermaid Stratford and the opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, seconded by Tyne Valley Sherbrooke, that this House do now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole House to take into consideration the said bill.
Shall it carry?
Carried.
The honourable member from Tignish Palmer Road, Deputy Speaker to chair the Committee of the Whole House, please.
now in a committee of the whole House to take into consideration a bill to be intituled an Act to amend the Health Services Act. The request has been made to bring a stranger onto the floor. Shall it be granted? Good afternoon. Would you please state your name and position for Hansard?
Hi, I'm Michelle Patterson, and I am the Research and Communications Office for the official opposition.
Thank you very much and welcome. Honourable members, it is now the pleasure of the committee that the bill be read clause by clause, section by section, or as a whole. And I'll open it up. Actually, Promoter, would you like to begin with a brief statement on the bill's intent?
Yes, certainly. So this bill is essentially, it is to repeal changes that were made in 2018 to the Health Services Act. It is specifically looking at changes that had an impact on some of the powers that were afforded to the board that shifted over to the minister. And when I started to, and along with staff in our office, to consider and look at best practices across the country, it became quite clear that having a health authority with a board that is unable to make decisions without the minister having the power to step in at any time and make changes to those decisions about the day-to-day operations of health PEI in this case was simply not a best practice approach. So this bill is strictly repealing those changes, except for one piece I do want to mention. We did keep the representation requirement for a representation from the east and from the west of the island on the board. That was a change that was made in 2018 that remains that would remain after these changes.
Thank you very much. The floor is open for questions. Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Chair. And I guess that you had already alluded to this to some extent, but it would appear that you did a jurisdictional scan across the country of other health boards, health agencies, and the like. So could you detail just a bit what you found out in that jurisdictional scan?
Yes, certainly. So, just first of all, as an overview, what we found is that when you have it's very unusual to have a situation where the minister would have ultimate authority to step in and make any changes at any time to decisions that had been made by a board such as the Board of Health PEI, the Board of the Health Authority. So, perhaps, Michelle, would you want to give some more information on the scan?
Sure. So the majority of provinces that we looked at operated under a governance where, which is very similar to the pre-2018 amendments, whereas the minister and the department set out the policy and the strategic goals for the health authority, and the health authority and the board itself were tasked with the operational mandate of that. So there's several different approaches, but the best practices that we found across the country were largely a board which operated at an arm's length from the ministry.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just add as well, if that's all right, Chair, that there are still a lot of responsibilities that still remain with the minister, even after the changes that we are proposing. So the minister still does have authority over developing the strategic plan, as well as a business plan and a budget. So this is really allowing the board to actualize the goal set out in that strategic plan without interference along the way that might make it difficult for them to work toward the long-term goals of the healthcare system.
Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Chair. In your response to my previous question, you mentioned that that you came across like several different delivery mechanisms that you like, but that what you're putting forward here, you feel to be the best practice. So how did you come to that conclusion? Is that a personal opinion of best practice, or is it more general, or where did you get that feedback from? I'd be interested in knowing. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So when we looked at examples of what's happening in other jurisdictions across the country, we did see that it was certainly uncommon to have the minister have that ultimate authority. Also speaking with healthcare professionals, as well as, past members of the board and those who are currently involved in the healthcare system, there was a general consensus that with Health PEI being an independent health authority that has a board, that structure really is most effective when that board is able to fully function, as a board. That's the structure that's in place. And when we add in that sort of mystery factor, or that the factor that the minister can step in at any time and make any changes, it adds a lot of stress, honestly, and confusion, for those healthcare professionals that are working toward the long-term goals for our healthcare system. Michelle, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that sums it up. Again, the best practice that we're referring to is really that fundamental board autonomy. The exact complexities of it differ from province to province.
Minister of Health and Wellness.
Yes, you had mentioned that you had consultations. Just wondering how broad those were, and if you would share. I would have to say that in almost any consultation, the feedback that you get, the opinions that you receive back are going to be varied. So if you could share with what the consultation process was that you had, who you did consult with, and what the feedback was overall on that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Quite honestly, the response that we got did not vary very much. We reached out to the current chair and the current board and shared this draft. We did not receive any formal feedback on the draft, but certainly we're also not informed of any concerns that the current board had with these changes. We also spoke with Keith Dewar, who is a former Health PEI CEO, and shared these the amendments that we have put forward with him, and he was supportive of those changes. We've also reached out to Denise Lewis-Fleming, the current CEO of Health PEI. Again, we did not receive a response in favor or against the changes. We reached out to Dr. Michael Garnham, who is the current Health PEI COO and has a significant role in the current restructuring within Health PEI. And we did get a response from Dr. Garnham, and he is very much in support of these changes based on the work that he has done in other provinces. He has provided that feedback that this is the model that is the most appropriate when you're working with a health authority like Health PEI, that the board should have and must have the ability to function as a board. And I think that's a really key one because, if we are looking to recruit and retain excellent healthcare professionals like Dr. Garnham, we do need to align with best practices within our healthcare system and to ensure that he and others like him are supported to effectively do their work and feel that they are, comfortable and reassured in their role and the way that the structure of the system works. So we also reached out to the Medical Society of PEI and the PEI Nurses Union, and again, we did not get any response, but also there were no concerns shared about this draft. I'll also add that when these original changes were brought forward in 2018, at that time, the only consultation that was done was with the board at that time. What we know, of course, if for those who remember what happened after the changes to the legislation passed, all of the board members at that time resigned because they were so much in opposition to the changes that had been put forward. That was the only consultation that happened. So I will just note that if we are particularly concerned about appropriate consultation, it would be most appropriate to support the bill that I've put forward that is repealing changes that were based on what I would say is certainly insufficient consultation.
Minister of Wellness or Health and Wellness?
One of the comments that you made there, which I find interesting, function as a board. When you reached out, when you had conversations, as I understand from your consultation, you did reach out to present board members, but you didn't hear anything back from them. Am I correct in that?
We don't have any anything to show in writing in terms of the opinion or position of the current board members and the chair, and I would not want to speak on his or their behalf in this situation. I can understand the difficult position it does put them in to have to make a comment on something that will directly, impact their the authorities that they might have. So, I think that there's probably some very good reason why they've chosen not to comment. But I will also note they certainly did not express any concerns at all with this legislation. And I wouldn't, you could certainly ask as well. I hope that you have, Minister.
Minister of Health and Wellness.
Thank you, Chair, and I do appreciate where you're coming from there, Member. With regard to present board members, does it put them potentially in an awkward situation? Absolutely. But again, going back to that, in my opinion, a fairly general overall comment of being able to function as a board. I have served for a number of years as a board member and as chair of the West Prince Health Board. And that was prior to Health PEI coming into existence in, I believe the year was 2010. But certainly at that time, there was a relationship between the individual boards across the province and the ministers, or the minister of the day. I never have heard that concern. Now, maybe I've missed something, but that a concern that any health board presently, or back when I had the privilege and the honor to sit on the West Prince Health Board, that they were not able to function as a board. So I do find that an interesting comment. And I'm just wondering, where did you get that comment from, inability to function as a board?
Yeah, so it wouldn't be a direct quote, but I would suggest that the minister and others, you could refer to any media story that happened in 2018.
Okay.
Well, that's where the board members, the former board members, were quite vocal about their concerns with the changes and why they chose to resign. So I think if you're not happy or you don't feel that the quotes in the media are sufficient, I would say actions speak louder than words, in that those board members actually left their role because these changes happened. I want to just say that there's no point, and I might have misunderstood what the minister was saying, but there's no point in sort of time traveling back to a time before Health PEI existed, because the current structure, we do have Health PEI.
We're talking about boards here, though, on the question that I had.
Yeah, and these changes, so I will get to that. So these changes don't actually, wouldn't change the fact that we do have Health PEI that exists as a health authority. When you have a board for that health authority that is tasked with, moving forward with the operational plans, making decisions, and that are based on evidence, working with staff to actualize the strategic plan. And as they are making those long-term plans, you have a situation where at any point, and this is what we currently have in our legislation, that the minister can step in and make any changes at any point. That takes, essentially you've removed the actual role of the board, and that they now become a advisory committee, because the minister is able to step in at any time and make any changes to those plans without providing any reason. That's what we have in this legislation right now. As well, one of the great things about the board that does work very well is that their meeting minutes, it's all public, it's transparent, so people can see exactly how and why and when decisions were made. Within the current structure, with the minister being able to step in and make changes in any time, at any way, the transparency is really reduced, and it does become quite problematic to be able to understand how and when those decisions are being made. Michelle, did you have anything else on that? Oh, that's all right? Okay.
Minister of Health and Wellness.
Well, just to go back to the promoter's comment, to go back to prior to Health PEI coming into existence in 2010, I think it was, the promoter was a member of it herself, referred back to media in 2018. So if we're going back, boards, not only in 2018, other boards, school boards, so on and so forth, for a variety of reasons, may feel that they need to resign, and I respect that, but I think to make a blanket statement that that boards, whether it was prior to 2010 or whether it was subsequent to that or presently, that they cannot function as a board under the current or previous legislation is a pretty broad statement. But anyway, Mr. Chair, I will leave it at that. If I could move on to, when we look at repealing of subsection 2 bracket 3 and bracket 4 being repealed, when I look at that, you remove, as you've alluded to, you certainly do remove a number of responsibilities of the minister. So you had indicated that, yes, that you did do a certain amount of consultation, that you looked at best practices, the governance system set up in other jurisdictions. Just like wondering on that, when you look at the changes in 2, 3, and 4, you had mentioned about different jurisdictions. Certainly, as I understand it, and certainly feel free to correct me if I'm completely wrong on this, but the 2018 amendments are consistent, provided a consistent act with a number of other provinces across the country.
Well, the number would be 2. So there's similarity in the language that exists in Nova Scotia and Saskatchewan, but that would be certainly in the minority.
Okay. I'd understood that there was 2 more, but anyway, that's, okay. I appreciate your answer on that. When we look specifically at section 2, bracket 3, and the 2018 amendment reads, the minister is responsible for strategic direction of the healthcare system in the province and may do anything that the minister considers advisable for that purpose. So to me, the strategic direction, the key 2 words there, when you, with your amendment and repealing of 2 bracket 3, your comments, your opinion on who ultimately then is responsible for the strategic direction of the healthcare system.
Thank you for the question. So this is a very good question, and actually repealing this section doesn't take away the responsibility from the minister in terms of developing the strategic plan. That's in a different section, and Michelle's going to find that right now. But what is concerning about this section is the minister may do anything that the minister considers advisable. That's the concerning part, and that's the part that is, was over and above and added in 2018. So the first part of that section is actually really just sort of clarifying some points that are, in terms of strategic planning, are already existing in the Act and aren't removed. So, Michelle, do you have that section where it talks about the strategic plan?
Yeah, I think your concerns might be addressed in 15, bracket 2, where it states there again that there's a strategic plan clause, and that strategic plan is operationalized by Health PEI, but it contains information specified by the minister, submitted to the minister for approval of the strategic plan, and it following every 3 fiscal years. So the strategic plan ultimately would fall under the minister. The only thing that is changing there is the repeal, as the MLA mentioned, would be that the minister would not have the authority to
Do anything.
do anything that the minister considers advisable.
Minister of Health and Wellness.
Could you just repeat what you had said there? The minister would not have the, I'm not sure whether I misheard you or not.
Okay.
So under the current legislation, there is a line that says that the minister may do anything that the minister considers advisable under the health authority.
Yeah, and that's the part that would be removed as a part of our changes now. But just to clarify again, though it does mention strategic direction in that section, the strategic responsibility for the strategic plan and strategic direction, it exists in another part of this act, and that is not being removed. So the minister does, that is still primarily a responsibility of the minister. That doesn't change, and removing this clause doesn't impact that.
Minister of Health and Wellness.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So moving on then, with regard to 2(4), it certainly it does remove a number of the ministerial, I shouldn't say powers, but options, if you like. When you look at that in the 2018 amendment, and it does use the word may, not shall, but such things as establish goals and objectives, establish performance measures and targets, develop, implement, and evaluate provincial healthcare policies, conduct financial, human resources, and information technology planning for the healthcare system, develop methodologies for effective and efficient allocation of resources, which to me is quite important, administer the allocation of available resources for the provision of health services. You don't have any concerns with the breadth of removing all those 6, in my opinion, very important criteria.
So I do want to note again that what we're doing is directly repealing changes that happened in 2018, and the Act did function before that. So again, just to point out that, this section is removed, things like establishing goals and objectives for the provision of health services in the province, that is still part of what the minister's responsibility is under the strategic plan and the business plan and the budget. So those, again, just because that language in this section is being removed, that doesn't mean that the minister doesn't still have those responsibilities. Michelle, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll point you again to actually under section 2, 12, subsection 2, where it explains the duties and responsibilities of health PEI. Many of the subsections there actually speak to these specific powers, but in a way that health PEI is accountable to the minister for many of these powers. So for example, under subsection G, it says a health PEI will assist the minister in development of and implementation of health policies and standards, health information systems, human resource plan for the healthcare system, and other provincial health system initiatives. And there's several others there that I won't read out, but the spirit of the original legislation was a relationship and a partnership between the Health PEI Board and the minister, and that is still clearly stated after the amendments here as well.
Minister of Health and Wellness.
Mr. Chair, I have pretty well dominated the last half hour. I do have a number of other questions, but I do want to give, if any other...
Sure, I can move on and we can come back to you.
Absolutely.
Great. Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Chair. How is this board going to be picked?
That's a great question. So it's actually the minister still has the authority, or still would have the authority to choose select the members of the board. That won't change with these particular amendments, and that's what it is now and what it would continue to be. So the minister still does have quite a responsibility and authority in terms of the board.
yeah.
Leader of the third party.
So you're not recommending that it's done through Engage PEI, like any other board or that sort of thing?
Yes, so, it's my understanding, and perhaps, Michelle can clarify this as well, but that that particular language, that it would still usually go through Engage PEI, and that's language that exists in other acts where the minister might be ultimately responsible, but the process still goes through Engage PEI, so that would still be the expectation. Michelle, is that fair?
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
But the
Leader of the third party?
The minister would have the authority to pick the CEO.
No, that's a great question. So that part of our changes are that the board would have the authority to select the CEO. And we feel that's really important because it's the CEO of Health PEI needs to be able to work directly and effectively with the board. That's a very important relationship. So that the board would have the authority to make that decision is very important.
Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Chair. That's
Summerside Wilmot.
Chair, and thank you for bringing this forward. This has been an interesting and informative discussion, and after what you just had said about the previous board resigning, I was curious and wanted to look up some quotes from that, and I'd just like to share it as a comment, if I may. Alex Macbeth, as I understand it, was the chair at the time, and his quote in the media had said, "The amendment removes important checks and balances on the minister. Without them, there are greater opportunities for politics to influence decision-making in the healthcare system." And I think that is incredibly concerning as a concept. I'm just curious if you can think of examples of when political interference in health would ever improve outcomes.
Thank you for that question. I think one of the things that we heard from Dr. Garnham and other healthcare professionals, consistently is that when there is a disruption in a plan, so when there is a plan based on evidence that has been agreed on by the board, and staff within Health PEI are planning to move it forward, and at the last minute there is some sort of a change, there's really that decision doesn't have to be, the minister could make decisions that aren't necessarily based on evidence or any, sort of solid ground, I guess, is extremely problematic. And I'm realizing that we're probably on time.
When you're finished, we'll move on.
Okay,
Yeah.
we can move on, we'll come back.
Okay, great, thank you very much. We're honorable members, we're now going to move on. I guess you're going to adjourn debate.
Okay, so, yes. Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I move the Speaker take the chair and that the chair report progress and beg leave to sit again.
Shall I carry?
Carry.
Mr. Speaker, as chair of the Committee of the Whole House having under consideration the bill to be intituled an act to amend the Health Services Act, I beg leave to report that the committee has made some progress and begs leave to sit again. I move that the report of the committee be adopted.
Shall I carry? The honourable member from Morel, Donagh, Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move that debate on motion 32 continue.
Shall I carry? Honourable members, the mover of this motion had the floor, so we'll go to Charlottetown, Winslow.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, I just started my remarks and just wanted to commend the seconder rather of this motion for bringing this up in the House last week. And as a parent of school-age children and as the spouse of a school teacher, it's an issue with regards to the student well-being teams, and mental health for students and for parents is extremely important. Anyone in this House and watching right now, Mr. Speaker, with a child in schools, they know that the students this year especially this year, have been asked to deal with a wide range of challenges. Sometimes they may be academic, sometimes they may be socioeconomic, and sometimes they're physically or mental health related. It's why it is so important that we direct as much support as possible to our students to support them in their academic journey. Now, the important issue and an important aid to help these students along has been the student well-being teams. The student well-being teams, Mr. Speaker, are collaborative teams, if you're unfamiliar, that draw together the expertise of a range of professionals. They support the mental, physical, and social health of Island students. They're made up, Mr. Speaker, of registered nurses, social workers, occupational therapists, and outreach workers. The student well-being teams were first introduced by the previous government back in 2017. They were launched in certain families of schools and the phased-in approach over the 3 years, and it's great. By 2019, the student well-being teams were in place in all family schools across the province and now work directly with over 1,000 students. Now, earlier this year, representatives of the student well-being teams presented to the Standing Committee on Education and Economic Growth that I'm a member of. I found this a very important presentation. It was great to actually hear about an update and maybe even some of the challenges that the student well-being teams face. One of the stories that I took from it, Mr. Speaker, was the presenter mentioned a story about Kyle. I won't use his last name, but he actually is a member of the student well-being team at the school that my wife teaches at. And the presenter had told us the story how sometimes to connect with a student, you have to kind of go outside of the classroom. And in this example, the student well-being team member took one of the students out to the basketball court outside the school because he knew that this child was very excited about basketball, and was able to connect and get more discussion from the student about education and how important it was. And I feel that is a very important thing. Now, of course, Mr. Speaker, why I brought this motion forward, and I'm very curious to hear from other members in the House as well, because, again, as a father of a student in grade 4 and also a student in grade 1, sometimes my daughter is very excited about school, has no problem waking up in the morning, very excited about learning. Sometimes my son, who's in grade 1, struggles a little bit to get out of bed and have that same yearning for learning. And as I always tell my son, that when your mother is a school teacher, you are going to learn to love school. I'm going to tell you that right now. So I do think that it's important. This motion that I'm bringing forward, Mr. Speaker, it's really twofold. One part is that, I do want to raise the awareness about the great work that's being done by the men and the women that are working collaboratively together for the benefit of the Island students as part of the student well-being teams. But it is also my hope in this motion that government does put in plan more supports. And I know that the Education Minister had mentioned in response to questions last week that it is something that her department is going to look towards, but bringing in supports for parents, because we know that it is so important that students, when they're raised so strongly at home, that will translate into how well they will perform at school. The member from Summerside, Wilmot, and I had a discussion about this prior. She had mentioned that her kids were homeschooled for a period. I was also a product of homeschooling, and my parents were very encouraging, very helpful in me fostering a strong appreciation and a strong desire to learn and to read and to always try to better myself. And sometimes as parents, with the added pressures of work, of course the pandemic that has taken place, but it is so important to have those supports. And as parents, sometimes you don't want to ask for help, but if that help can be there are parents that will ask for help to say, hey, you know what? my son or my daughter, they're having a tough time grasping this concept. I'm having a tough time grasping this concept as my daughter was trying to explain to me some of the math. And I said, no, I don't think that's how you do it. She said, no, Daddy, that is how you do it. And I said, okay, I'll go along with you. But again, I would like to kind of learn that myself. So again, I just hope that the department, and I know the minister, hope we'll share some thoughts on this. But just to make sure that the student well-being teams are there for the students, but the student well-being teams are also there for the parents of these students. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I will conclude my remarks, and I look forward to hearing from the rest of the House. Thank you.
Now I'll move to the second of the motioner, the honourable member from Royal Donor and the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member from Charlottetown-Winslow for bringing this motion forward and bringing forward a number of important motions in the House this session. This motion is about the student well-being teams, Mr. Speaker. In my time in serving in this House, I have found that there are few issues that animate citizens more than those that are involved with our schools and our education system, Mr. Speaker. Those issues have led to vigorous debates in this House and in our communities, particularly during the ill-fated move to close schools, Mr. Speaker. One initiative that didn't generate heated debate in this time was the creation of the student well-being teams by the former government, and I applaud them for that. There was a lot of buy-in at the time from all sides, which were phased in, as the member said, by different families of schools. I suspect that this was likely because of the concept behind the student well-being teams is an obvious sound one, Mr. Speaker. Using a collaborative approach, student well-being teams, they drew together allied professionals with a range of skill sets that can be drawn upon to support the mental, physical, and social health of students. These teams form a valuable resource to aid other supports for students inside the classroom and the school. Mr. Speaker, the mover of the motion is right. I did raise this in question period. And speaking with teachers and students and parents, the consensus that I hear is that the work of the student well-being teams is a good foundation for success. Mr. Speaker, one story from the 2019 election, Mr. Speaker, was an educational assistant who had talked about, and I'm going back to, getting into the home to help out, and they had talked about a student in particular, a number of students, but one student in particular, where they were really working hard to get them engaged in school, and they would continuously call home and say, why is so-and-so not in school today? We're working really well. We want to accomplish this. And the parents at the time said, they won't get out of bed. You come and get them. They said to the CEA, you come and get them. Come on over here. And you know what? She would have loved to have done that, and it was tough. And there's a number of issues there. But what she was telling me was that it's that outreach. It's almost like a disconnect, and it's not simply a home and school thing. It's not a parent-teacher interview. It's quite honestly, it's probably a preventative thing. But these student well-being teams are there, after the fact, and hopefully they're working on new strategies. But it was concerning to hear, Mr. Speaker. I was in attendance when they had made the presentation to the Standing Committee on Education and Economic Growth. I was particularly struck by the discussion from team members around the importance of parental engagement to further the impacts that the teams are having on our students. Listening to that discussion made me think of a bridge, because that's really what we're trying to achieve here, to serve as that bridge of supports between the school and the home. One quote from that committee meeting, Mr. Speaker, was, "We've been saying since the very beginning, and schools have been very loud about this, and we've noticed it in our own referrals and families that we're working with. We need somebody who is dedicated to supporting parents. That's a huge, huge piece of our work. We can't always get to it as much as we like." And that stuck with me. We need somebody who's dedicated to supporting the parents, Mr. Speaker. I couldn't tell you how many times I've had a conversation with students, or sorry, with the teachers and the staff, where they've said if there's only way that we could extend these supports into the home to reinforce the support the students get at school. They're trying to get in and help, and I think it's an important thing, Mr. Speaker. You know, we've heard we've always heard about you know the guidance counselors in the school, Mr. Speaker, and you know, should we have one for every school, and we have, you know, split between a number of schools, or with the larger schools, do we have enough help there? And there's no doubt that these teams are helping bridge that gap as well, Mr. Speaker. But it's about how do we connect with families as well, Mr. Speaker. You know, this doesn't discount the work that we need to do for preventative. You know, the first 1,000 days, I believe government really needs to get on that. You know, obviously the pre-K that's going to be rolled out. These things are all important leading up to school. But these school teams, student well-being teams are important after the fact too, Mr. Speaker. They say it takes a village to raise a child, but with better alignment of support between schools, the student well-being teams, and home, we can build that village, Mr. Speaker. I know the PEI Home and School Federation would certainly welcome the efforts to strengthen that engagement as well. Mr. Speaker, I guess what I think the message was, you know, they've been up and running now. They've got a good sense of what's going on, these teams, and it's about listening to them. I certainly don't think you know, us as a legislature or the department should be saying immediately to, you know, we need to put a new person on that directly to the home. You know, maybe it's you know, I think the idea of forming of this engagement on the home has to come from the student well-being teams, Mr. Speaker. So I think it's incumbent upon the department and the minister to you know to let them come up with, I don't want to say a solution, but a help, so that they can get into the homes, they can help with these strategies. I think it's incumbent upon the teachers as well to understand what the students are going through as well, and to help out. So, Mr. Speaker, with that, I'll conclude my remarks. But again, I just want to repeat the final clause in this motion, that this Assembly encourage the province to explore avenues to further the positive impact of student well-being teams for island students and their families by leveraging the power of parental supports. And that's where it's at, Mr. Speaker, it's about the continued positive impact of these teams. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture, Land, Justice, Public Safety, and the Attorney General.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the members for recognizing the great work that these teams of people do for island children and island families. We hear a lot of positive comments about the work that the student well-being team do, Mr. Speaker, and I'm very proud of the work that school outreach workers do. Their job is to support young families, to build skills, Mr. Speaker, and knowledge, and to use at school and at home. They teach problem solving and role model new ways of solving problems. Mr. Speaker, the fact that outreach workers are located in the schools makes it easier to build trust with the students, Mr. Speaker. The relationships between young persons and the student well-being team members can really empower students to make the right choices for themselves. School outreach workers are people students trust to talk about difficult things, Mr. Speaker. With justice workers, have a wealth of knowledge and to share with young people. The programs they offer, like Triple P Parenting, that benefits both students and their families, Mr. Speaker, I think all members would agree that this kind of support students and their families want and need. There's no questions that student well-being teams do good work and that government should continue this important initiative. From a justice perspective, I am absolutely supportive of these teams and the work that they do. Mr. Speaker, we know the early intervention can have such a long-lasting impact. The more we can do to help guide the next generation on a positive path forward, the lower the chance they will find themselves in the criminal justice system, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I want to mention the work back a year ago, almost a year ago now, Mr. Speaker, when we did the the milk, cheese, and potato giveaway, Mr. Speaker. After our first successful one, I was talking to a good friend of mine who is he's one of the head counselors at the school board, Mr. Speaker, Murray McGinnis, Mr. Speaker, and we were chatting, and I said, is there anything that, I was just asking as a concerned citizen, Mr. Speaker, about some of the issues he was seeing in the fact that the kids weren't in school. And he said that the student well-being team had reached out to him, Mr. Speaker, because they were scared. They hadn't had eyes on some of their students that they cared about in such a long time that they were worried about them, Mr. Speaker. So with that, I said, well, maybe if we arrange early pickup, some of your student well-being teams can come and pick up packages and take them to these houses. And that's what, with the Minister of Education at the time, we arranged it, and the student well-being team came in, and every one of them had picked up package for their concerned families, Mr. Speaker, so they could so they could see the family, make sure everyone was okay in that household, Mr. Speaker. So the work that they do is incredible. It's not even just at the school hours, Mr. Speaker, it's after the school. And I want to thank the members who did that and to thank the well-being teams that provided that. It's a real upstream progressive approach, Mr. Speaker. Community well-being is what we should be taking in all aspects of our life, Mr. Speaker. And I think our student well-being teams are a perfect example how our justice system can look going forward, Mr. Speaker. If there are any opportunities to expand the work, Mr. Speaker, I will be very supportive to do so, Mr. Speaker. And with that, I want to thank my colleagues again and tell them that I will fully support this motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister of Education, Lifelong Learning, the Minister responsible for the status of women.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I firstly want to thank the honourable members for bringing this motion forward. It's certainly one that I will be supporting. Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity yesterday morning to meet with a number of the members of the student well-being teams, and I walked away from that meeting just feeling so awe-inspired. They are an incredible group. They've done so much work. As some of the members spoke to already today, there's still work to be done. There's many opportunities for enhancements within this program, but I just want to commend them for the work that they've done to date. It's pretty remarkable. I also, Mr. Speaker, had the opportunity to meet with the PEITF Teachers Advisory Committee there last week, and so it was a number of teachers that spoke or were in attendance, probably about 10, and between all of them, the supportive remarks that they provided regarding the well-being teams, again, just to me, further exemplified and really just spoke to some of the work that these well-being teams do, and I'm really proud and to stand here today and to speak to some of the details regarding their work and ongoing commitment to the teams. So some of the members have already alluded to, the student well-being teams work in schools. They advise, they consult, and they provide direct service to children and youth who are struggling with mental, social, and physical health issues. The mission of our student well-being teams is to empower strength, resilience, and well-being in Island school-aged children and their families. Each team includes trained professionals who have experience working with children and youth, including school health nurses, social workers, school outreach workers, and occupational therapists. When professionals are co-located in schools and all our agencies are working together, it is less intrusive for the children and keeps children at the center of the conversations. By being located within our schools, we are bringing supports directly to our families and our children. I think it's important to note that members of our student well-being teams they work 12 months of the year, even when children are not in the physical school building. Mr. Speaker, that's something I hadn't realized, and certainly something that I've been informed on over the last couple of months, and it's really great to hear that these children and their families are being supported throughout the summer as well. The student well-being team has grown considerably since it started in 2017, and is now available in every family of schools. Through one-on-one, group sessions, and presentations, our teams have been able to reach over 30,000 students and 6,000 parents. We are pleased that all schools now have the resources of a student well-being team, and we encourage students and parents to reach out and get to know their teams. We have made the referral process easier with an online referral form and increased our efforts to ensure schools and families know about the available services that can be provided. That's certainly something that they spoke to in my meeting yesterday, was just around some of the ways in which we can enhance communications, and they're using social media. I'd encourage you to follow them on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. They've got updates almost daily, so it's wonderful. This is also, as for their communications, it's also included presentations to school communities, including the district advisory councils as well. Safe and caring learning environments that support the mental health and social emotional well-being of children is a responsibility of the entire school community. So teachers, Mr. Speaker, counselors, student well-being teams, bus drivers, coaches, parents, and caregivers. Mr. Speaker, when a referral to the student well-being teams comes in, the team lead follows an intake process, including reaching out to the family and child to better understand how the team can help and what member or members of the team may be most beneficial. Once that is identified, Mr. Speaker, the team member will then individualize their support to that child and family, including home visits when given permission by the family. Members of the student well-being teams are trained in cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy, and group sessions are offered on a variety of topics, including behavior therapy, coping skills, confidence building, and parental groups like active parenting of teens and triple P parenting. Positive parenting from 2 home group sessions began in March. And Mr. Speaker, I just learned also that there's positive parenting from 2 homes for kids. So that's something if any members want to learn more, they can check that out online as well, or I can certainly reach out to me and I'll find some information. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, there are great community resources that the student well-being teams can help families connect to, such as Strongest Families. I think with the launch of the Bridge the Gap webpage, we are helping to better notify Islanders of the many government and non-government supports that are available. I'd encourage you, if you haven't done so already, that Bridge the Gap website is certainly helpful. Mr. Speaker, I want to add my voice to the other members who have applauded the tremendous work of our student well-being teams. Our student well-being teams have identified a gap when it comes to supports for parents, and is something I too have heard from teachers and the communities. I promise to work with my colleagues to create more opportunities to support the family unit. We will start by doing an environmental scan to review what other jurisdictions are doing. We will find ways to enrich and enhance the work of our teams so that our family units can succeed. Mr. Speaker, again, I just wanted to say thank you to all those involved in the student well-being teams. I commend your work. It was, again, a really insightful conversation that we had yesterday, and I look forward to enhancing this program together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Charlottetown, Victoria Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I am happy to speak to this motion. And in working with my former role as school counselor, one of the things that we understand, and one of the things we understand as educators in general, is that students are a part of a familial system. And so you can work as hard as you like with one child, and the reality at the end of the day is if they're living in a home life that they're living with any sort of dysfunction, the reality is if the family's not receiving support, when the child goes home at the end of the day, they're going back to that same environment. And so counseling and working with children is really difficult in that area, because you really do have to keep that in mind, and you also have to watch your boundaries, because they are living in this familial system and you don't want to put them in jeopardy. And so it's a really, in certain cases, can be such a delicate dance. And so the work I mentioned this morning, I was in with the student well-being teams, and we were talking about school communities, and one of the things that I had said was the importance of building the relationship with the school family. And so as much as you can, and I was very clear to let them know that I understand that they're operating under enormous amounts of stress, that they've got really big caseloads, but that if they could in certain days go in and spend a little bit of time in the school, and then that way their faces would be known to the community, to the school community, and the kids would be able to rally around them and all of those sorts of things. One of the things that we heard loud and clear when the student wellbeing team was in to speak to the committee was this ask. And I remember I found the wording when I first read the motion. I was opposed to it because it looked as though you were asking parents to the way I read it, and my experience is that you were asking parents to kind of step up. And in some cases, sure, but in a lot of cases, parents are, you're not able to get a hold of the parents, or the parents aren't available, or they're not well. So I see now the clarification, but the wording is a little bit confusing to me. So in working with parents, that's absolutely, and I know that the Minister of Justice and Public Safety had announced a parental program as well, and there's positive parenting from 2 homes. So there are a lot.
Honourable member, the hour has been called. She have to adjourn the meeting. And second her.
And with that, I adjourn debate, and I'll second Mermaid Stratford, please.
Shall I carry? The honourable member from Morel, Donna, and the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the Minister of Economic Growth, Tourism and Culture, that this House adjourn until March 31st at 1 o'clock in the PM.
Shall I carry?